Hello, very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Coming up on today's show, we'll be talking about an unprecedented rise in the terror threat.
And why a former head of the British Army is warning that we risk a repeat of the 1930s.
Plus in sport, Britain's Cameron Norrie is going for a place in the last 16 of the Australian Open tennis for the first time in his career.
It's Saturday, the 20th of January. Police warn that the war in Gaza has energised Islamist extremists. Hollywood star Alec Baldwin faces new manslaughter charges over the death of a cinematographer on the set of Rust. The big freeze is over, but here comes the storm. The Met Office issues a danger to life warning with 80-mile-an-hour winds on their way. Mouthwash, tea bags and sausages all fall victim to shrinkflation as retailers cut costs.
And in sport, teenage darts prodigy Luke Littler has won his first senior title at the Bahrain Masters and becomes the youngest player to hit a 9-dart finish on television.
Hello, very good morning. Welcome to The Breakfast Show. Police are warning of an unprecedented rise in the threat from terrorism. According to the UK's most senior counter-terrorism officer, Israel's war in Gaza has radicalised Islamist extremists. They say the needles on the dashboard are moving in the wrong direction. So let's bring in our political correspondent, Rob Powell. And Rob, it's quite a stark warning this morning, isn't it?
It is. This is from a briefing that Matt Jukes gave to journalists. He's the most senior counter-terrorism officer in the country, as you say. And he essentially is laying out what the impact of tumultuous events abroad and overseas, especially in the Middle East, are having on the domestic terror threat. And he says it's essentially an increase that he has not seen before in his career. I can read you part of what he told journalists. He said, "It's hard to remember a more unstable, dangerous and uncertain world. I have not seen the conditions collide in the way we have in the last months during my tenure." To give you a sense of the numbers, he says that since October the 7th, since that Hamas attack into Israel, there have been over 3,000 referrals for what he terms objectionable material, which peaked at a 15-fold increase compared to the same period in the previous year. Now, not all of those will go on to be prosecuted or be criminal offences. He says out of those, about 700 were identified as being potentially in breach of legislation. But he says the problem is that you need to bring a lot more people in to sift through that. Because he said counter-terrorism work is essentially looking for a needle in a haystack anyway. And with this, the haystack just got a lot bigger.
So that's the terror threat. But meanwhile, there are warnings this morning about the threat to us from international sources because of our defence capabilities.
Yeah, sort of a linked story. If this was the domestic risk, Lord Dannatt, the former head of the British Army, is in the Times today talking about the overseas risk. He's essentially saying that more money needs to be put into defence because of the threat posed by superpowers like China and Russia. And he essentially makes a parallel with the 1930s and says the woeful state of British defence back then failed to deter Hitler, and says that he doesn't make the comparison lightly, but there's a risk of it happening again. I think what's interesting, when you listen to some Tory MPs, especially a couple that spoke in the debate that we had on the Yemen bombings earlier in the week, they also think that given what's going on overseas and the turmoil in other countries, that Britain should be spending more on defence. The problem is, how do you do that whilst also spending a lot on the NHS, whilst also trying to cut taxes in the run-up to the next general election?
Yeah, lots of demands on the public purse there. Plenty more on that throughout the morning. We're going to keep an eye on that story. In the meantime, our other main story today is about Alec Baldwin facing new charges.
Yeah, two and a bit years, I think, since the incident happened. There seems to have been sort of ups and downs in this. It could be a sort of film of itself, I guess, but it looks like it's running towards some sort of conclusion.
Yeah, that's right. Charges were dropped a year ago, but now let's get more on that because the American actor Alec Baldwin faces new charges of involuntary manslaughter. Helena Hutchins was killed in 2021 when a prop gun that Baldwin was holding went off. Well, our US correspondent James Matthews has more.
Alec Baldwin has always said that he pulled the hammer of that weapon but didn't pull the trigger. Charges of involuntary manslaughter were laid against him, but they were dropped in April. Prosecutors then said there was evidence that the gun had been modified and could have malfunctioned. But further tests were instructed on the weapon and they found evidence that the trigger had indeed been pulled, concluding that given the test findings and observations reported, the trigger had to be pulled or depressed sufficiently to release the fully cocked or retracted hammer. Alec Baldwin has duly been charged once more with involuntary manslaughter. He's not the only one connected to that movie who is facing criminal charges. The weapons supervisor on set faces trial on involuntary manslaughter. Her trial is due to begin in February. In terms of the latest developments, they've been welcomed by lawyers for the family of the woman who died, saying that they have always wanted to know what happened on that fatal day. As for Alec Baldwin, we haven't heard from him directly, but in a statement, his lawyers say, "We look forward to our day in court."
Japan has made history after successfully landing the moon snipe on the moon, becoming only the 5th country to ever achieve such a feat. But not everything went according to plan. The craft's solar panels aren't working. A fire broke out at an industrial estate in South Wales, with billows of smoke and bright orange flames rising above Bridgend. Several emergency service vehicles responded at the scene. The Welsh Ambulance Service said it attended the scene, but there were no injuries. Over 2/3 of council areas have seen the rates of gonorrhea and syphilis increase since 2017. Analysis by the Local Government Association revealed the biggest increases were seen in Wigan, Dorset, Somerset and Devon. Councils want the government to provide extra funding for sexual health clinics. And urgent action is needed to stop further outbreaks of measles across towns and cities. Health experts say that vaccination rates across the country have been falling, with particular concerns in some regions, including parts of London and the West Midlands. The UK Health Security Agency is calling for more people to get the jab to prevent the spread of the potentially deadly virus. Yeah, measles is something we're going to be talking about a little bit later on. We've got a GP coming on to talk about that and the risks of this rise in cases. But right now, Alice has come in with an awful lot of products, and there's a reason for that. It's because we're going to talk about shrinkflation. A lot of you might have noticed it on the supermarket shelves, which the consumer organisation has been doing a bit of research, haven't they? Remind us what shrinkflation is, first of all, Alice.
Well, inflation is the increase in prices, the increase in what we pay for our goods. But shrinkflation is when the prices are going up, but you're getting less for your money.
Stingeflation.
Maybe that's the new trend, stingeflation. And here we've got examples. These are all examples of shrinkflation. So, for example, here they've got 5 bars, but in this packet there used to be 6. So you're getting less for your money. I'm going to pass that round.
Okay. Well, I get in trouble if I open them.
Have that for
Pass them on.
breakfast.
It's brunch. It's too early for brunch. It's still definitely breakfast.
So these crisps as well. Crisps are a big example of shrinkflation as well. These used to be 250 grams. They're now 230 grams.
That's quite sneaky because it's not much.
Exactly.
But it's enough.
But I
Does
reckon
the packet stay the same size? They just change the level of crisps?
Oh, I don't. Well, you're the crisp expert, aren't you?
See, I think the undercover shrinkflation is the multi-packs. They've definitely shrunk packets of those, definitely.
I think you're our undercover crisp expert, actually. You're
I think
definitely...
normal crisps have shrunk, though. If you buy a single packet of crisps, there's 8 crisps
like
in
that.
it, about 8.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's never enough.
ridiculous.
But have you heard of skimpflation?
Well, I hadn't until this morning, I'll be honest.
Well, let me tell you about skimpflation. So skimpflation is when the manufacturers reduce the most expensive ingredient in a product. For example, here, these Tesco sausages, they used to be 97% pork. They're now just 90%. So I'm going to pass that round.
What's the 10%?
I was going to say,
Well, I
you don't
know,
want to know
many-
what the 10%...
Probably quite yummy sort of salts and bits. And if, for example, this spreadable butter, this used to be 54% butter and it's now 50% butter.
Yeah.
Have you noticed some things do taste worse, though? Like, I love biscuits. I love, plain biscuits. Digestives do not taste the way they used to when I was a teenager. They just don't, because they put different ingredients in them. Cheaper ones.
I can't say I've noticed that, I must say, but definitely the chocolate bars as well. Huge wrappers. The wrappers seem to get bigger and the chocolate inside them seems to get
Go
smaller.
back to crisps.
I told
What they've
you.
done is they've made normal packs smaller and then they've rebranded the what were normal as like party packs and put the price up. I reckon that could be.
Yeah,
If it's a
grab
party
bag.
pack, at least it makes it feel you're having fun at the same time.
It's clearly not working. Not with Rob, anyway. More crisp news from Rob a little bit later on. But in the meantime, let's move on, because the number of young people approaching their council as homeless or about to become homeless has risen in the last year, according to research by the homelessness charity Centrepoint. Amelia Harper has this report.
I was in the train station, underground, about to walk in front of a train, and someone stopped me.
Homelessness nearly ended Ben's life. Aged 19, accused of a crime he didn't commit, he found himself kicked out of home and onto the streets.
That false accusation hit me hard because, first of all, it's something I wouldn't do. And then when I was on the streets, I basically had no help. Went from something to nothing real quick. I was sectioned. I was sectioned for a week because of my sleep deprived and anxiety. And after that, I was put in like an emergency accommodation for like a week.
Hello. How are you today?
Now supported by New Horizon Youth Centre in London, Ben's story isn't uncommon. He's just one of those at the heart of a mounting youth homelessness crisis. Centres like this provide a safe haven for people without a home, but they're under more pressure because homelessness among young people has risen dramatically over the last year. In 2021-22, the number of 16 to 24-year-olds who told their council they were homeless or about to become homeless was 129,000. But just 1 year later, that number rose by nearly 7,000. It means that a new young person faces homelessness every 4 minutes. To combat this, 120 charities have backed a petition urging the government to create a national youth homelessness strategy.
We don't need statistics to tell us what's happening. We see this every day at New Horizon Youth Centre. Just in December, we had double the amount of people coming through our doors as the previous December. The situation is just escalating. And, you know, we're fed up of... I arrive at the centre and sometimes I have to step over people in sleeping bags. We're fed up of having young people crying, feeling suicidal with nowhere to go.
Young homeless people are asking for help and the numbers needing it are rising. There is support out there, but charities warn without more, the crisis could reach boiling point. Amelia Harper, Sky News.
Now, the Met Office has issued a danger to life warning as Storm Isha is forecast to arrive this weekend, bringing winds of up to 80 miles an hour, as well as some heavy rain. So let's bring in our meteorologist, Joe Robinson, who's here with us. So, Joe, I mean, we were all saying it got horribly cold, but it was at least beautiful blue skies.
Yes, many
that's
of
all
us
about to change.
had sunshine, blue skies, yeah. No, it's all changed. We're on to the 9th named storm of the season already. So, yes, wet and windy weather today, but the storm is arriving tomorrow, Storm Isha. That's what we've got to prepare ourselves for. We could see gusts widely 50 to 60 miles per hour and locally up to 80 miles per hour and potentially even higher than that. And there are warnings in place for that. We've got amber warnings across quite a large part of the UK, really. You can see them here, stretching across from Northern Ireland, southern Scotland into northern England, parts of Wales and parts of southwest England as well. It's worth keeping an eye on the warnings because they're likely to be tweaked through the course of today. As you know, we're looking at computer models and seeing how things change, so they might be tweaked through the course of the day. And there are yellow warnings out as well, and it's not just the wind we need to be concerned about, it's the rain as well.
Why does it keep storming?
I know, it's been an unusual...
So much rain.
So much rain. Keeps storming.
I know, it has. Literally September, October, November, December, you know, Christmas was, you know, all the flooding that we had as well. Basically, I mean, it's all down to the jet stream. Unfortunately, when it's across us, it brings in all these low pressure systems, and that's when we keep seeing them, you know, and then when we have the settled spells, the high pressure moves in, and then we get the colder weather over the winter and the sunshine. But unfortunately, yeah, it's all down to the jet stream.
Because we have had snow in sort of March, April in recent years, haven't we? I remember moving into a flat in the midst of snow.
And you can, and you're more likely to get snow at Easter than you are at Christmas.
Is that right?
Yes, if you look at the stats, it's more likely to snow at Easter.
My birthday's in April, and sometimes it's freezing, and sometimes you're in your T-shirt, and you just don't know, do you?
It is. It's one of those transition months, isn't it, where you can, be bitterly cold, but actually have some lovely spring warm sunshine.
But it's a long way off,
I
and
know,
we're definitely
it does
not
feel
got
like it
nice
at the
weather now.
moment, with all that.
Conclusion. Joe, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's get a bit more detail now on the weather, shall we?
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
All changed this weekend as snow and ice are replaced by wind and rain with the arrival of Storm Isha, as Joe was saying, on Sunday. Overnight cloud and rain will spread across Ireland into western parts of Britain by Saturday morning, bringing an ice risk and hill snow to parts of Scotland. Much of England and Wales will be cold and dry with some patchy freezing fog.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You two big cooks.
Yes, I like cooking from scratch, and I sent all my kids off to uni with a little mum's cookbook of basic recipes. So
Did you? So they're good cooks as well?
Yeah.
They are? Well,
yeah.
Rob told an anecdote in the last hour, I don't know if you were watching, about his toddler complaining about you burning...
Spreading scurrilous rumours around the nursery about my cooking.
The reason we're talking about this is because Brooklyn Beckham has said that Dad was always in the kitchen, not so much Mum. He's done an interview with The Times where he's talked about how his father taught him to cook, and he said that he found his calling in the kitchen over lockdown, and he started sharing recipes online with his followers, calling the series... Can you guess what it's called?
Go on, break it to us.
Cooking with Brooklyn.
He's thought long and hard about that.
He has
come up with a really clever pun.
That's what it says on the tin.
Absolutely, you know what it is. I find that amazing. I mean, I interviewed Beckham back in the day when he was playing and he was young and he just moved into a flat with Posh, and I said, and are you going to go and cook dinner tonight after this? And he went, yeah, I've got my super noodles ready. I can make noodles.
Knows how to spoil a lady.
So the fact that he's got into cooking late in life, probably... Maybe from his friendship with Gordon Ramsay. They're super, super good friends. And
he's taught him a few tricks.
Maybe, yeah.
I think you get worse before you get better. I think you leave home probably knowing some of the basics, but then you just enjoy the fact that you can eat rubbish because you can. You're not being told by your parents to eat good food, and then you get better again.
I'm all right at cooking if I have got, like, very meticulous instructions in front of me. Like, I'm quite good at those boxes where you get recipes in. But anything where I'm having to kind of taste it and go a bit more... I don't know, I don't seem to have those kind of...
You're not intuitive.
No, like, my other half always has a go at me because she's like, you never taste anything you cook.
that might be a man thing. I think.
Maybe just stick to the crisps, Rob.
Stick to crisps. I'll write you a little Jackie's mum's cookbook with all the instructions on it.
That's what I want, yeah.
You'll be fine. I quite like one of those as well. Anyway, we've got lots coming up for you. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show. The US Republican presidential candidates are set to face off again in New Hampshire this week. Is Donald Trump at risk of losing his lead? Plus, we'll be discussing the stories making the news today with CEO of International Marketing Partners, Alison Stewart-Allen, and political correspondent for Politics, Joe Ava Santina Evans. That's all coming up.
We all live in an uncertain world. From global conflict and crises to moments full of hope and unity. We'll take you to the heart of the story and help you understand the world around us. Join me, Yalda Hakim, on my new show, The World, on Sky News.
Obviously, with New Year's resolutions and everything, I think there's the hardest part for people when it comes to like diet and dry January. When it comes around this time, that's when people really start to struggle and think, can I really go through the whole month? So reading the articles I've read now about Blue Monday, I think the biggest challenges are people working, in jobs, struggling financially, and then that post-Christmas slump of, oh, I'm not feeling very merry, you're not really around family that you may have been around Christmas. And so I can understand why people might go through it. I haven't really experienced it myself. I feel good.
You've done Dry January before, haven't you?
I have. I did it last year. So when I did Dry January last year, it was for a campaign for Water Aid. So it was more on the focus of more water rather than actually cutting out alcohol. So I actually cut out coffee, tea, fizzy drinks, juice. And I was drinking just water to promote, how important...
You were a lot of fun, weren't you?
I'm always fun.
I'm sure that's true, actually.
Just to promote how good water is. So yeah, Dry January, from what I've heard from my friends who are doing it this year, I think they're really struggling with the terms of just situational, like or me, I'm a big sports person, so, the playoffs are happening and people watching games at the pub, you're just, inclined to have a drink with your mates, and you just can't. You're drinking water, and people are like, come on, just have one. It's just one, mate. I think that kind of pressure and stress is why a lot of people fail dry January. The price of low alcohol and non-alcoholic drinks is actually going up, which is good because it's said to favour people who are more heavy drinkers, and they're going for, alcohol-free gin and alcohol-free beer and other drinks, which is great. I haven't actually tried it myself, but apparently they taste exactly the same. But obviously the medical benefits that we know as doctors are, you don't have the short-term and long-term negative effects of alcohol consumption. As you mentioned, the issue is the socioeconomically less developed groups are the groups who are at higher risk of a poor prognosis from alcohol-related disease, chronically and acutely. And so if they can't afford these alcohol-free drinks, they're going to go for the cheaper alternative, which is to have the alcohol, and that's what we're trying to steer them away from. You're almost defeating the aim if you can't access the demographics that you're actually trying to target.
Hello, welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, with US Republicans facing off a New Hampshire primary this week, we'll speak to a Democrat strategist and a US pollster. Let's get more now, though, on the Japanese moon landing. It's become the 5th country to successfully land on the surface of the moon, but the lander's solar panels have failed and its batteries are running out. Here's our science and technology editor, Tom Clark.
With the slim lander, Japan has made space history, becoming the 5th nation to execute a soft touchdown on the lunar surface. But you can tell from the faces at Mission Control that while they made the landing, they didn't exactly nail it.
The solar cell is not generating electricity at this point in time.
What went wrong? Possibly the lander failed to settle the right way up, like in this animation, and its solar panels are pointing at the lunar surface instead of the sun. But they're talking to their probe, and it successfully deployed 2 miniature rovers equipped with cameras which could, in the coming days, reveal what's happened and whether it achieved its key objective, demonstrating a precise landing for future lunar prospecting.
While moon rock might not look very exciting, it contains rare minerals and also, on certain parts of the moon's surface, water ice. And if you want to exploit that for a future lunar base, for example, you need to land as close as possible to where those mineral deposits are. And it's that accuracy that the SLIM mission is trying to demonstrate.
Unless they can restore power, it's unlikely SLIM will be able to fulfil its mission. But JAXA, Japan's space agency, has done better than others in the current race for the moon. In May, a privately funded Japanese probe crashed. In August, Russia's Luna 25 also failed to stick its landing. Days later, India's Chandrayaan-3 ended the run of bad luck, successfully touching down. But this week, a commercial American mission fell back to Earth, never making it to the moon. But there are more to follow.
It's become marginally more affordable to send things to space, not just because there are more rockets and more capacity to launch things now, but also because computer equipment has gotten so much better.
Japan has joined an exclusive club of lunar pioneers, but it could be weeks before we know just how successful it's been. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Now, Rob and I are going to take you through the front pages of the papers now, and we're kicking off with the Mirror, and they are focusing on the Tata Steel plant. They call it the final betrayal. They're concerned about the number of jobs that have gone. There are nearly 3,000 jobs that have gone at that steel plant. They're closing the blast furnaces, saying that they're costing them too much money, and they're focusing on a more environmentally friendly furnace, but that's not going to be ready for some time and won't employ as many people.
A really difficult day in Port Talbot yesterday. It's sort of another one of these pinch points, if you like, in the drive towards net zero, replacing blast furnaces with electric arc furnaces. And a difference as well politically. Government seems to be wanting to go faster. Labour is saying there should be more of a transition that would safeguard more jobs until that electric furnace comes in. We've also got the Mail front page as well. They're talking about the measles crisis, as they put it, and calling for an urgent vaccination programme. There it is there. Interestingly, I was listening to one of the government's chief scientists on this, and they said that if you think back to during the pandemic and R numbers, you know, how quickly it spreads, they say measles has the highest R number of any respiratory virus, contagious. 15.
Yes.
So one person gives it to 15 people, so pretty pressing.
Yeah, and it can be deadly as well. And I think there is a sort of, amongst old generations, they might remember it, and so they're perhaps more likely to feel that it's a danger, but younger generations haven't experienced
Once you feel it's not a danger anymore,
That's
sort of
it.
ironically, I guess, you sort of are less likely to get it.
I think that's right. Let's move on to the Telegraph now, because they're going their own way. They've got a story about Channel migrants being given the right to work. And this is an interesting story, isn't it? Because there wasn't a big announcement about this, was there?
So I woke up to a few messages from someone in government about this who points out, actually, as the Telegraph do, but quite far down this article, that it's not necessarily a new scheme. This is something I think in 2005 came in. It's derived from EU law. But the point that the Telegraph is making here, because of the increase in the number of people seeking asylum, you've got more people essentially taking up this scheme that allows people waiting for their asylum claims to be decided to work in sectors where staff are needed.
Really interesting. We'll take a look at the rest of the papers, and we're going to be discussing them in just a moment. But in the meantime, Jackie, over to you.
Thanks very much indeed. We've got more moments of genius from darts teenage superstar. Luke Littler has become the youngest player to throw a perfect 9-dart leg on television, but could he also win his first professional title? And after 259 days, Brentford prepared to welcome their talisman, Ivan Toney, back to the Premier League. And Glasgow tried to book their spot in the Champions Cup knockout stages. We'll have all the action.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, I'll be talking about US politics and the upcoming presidential election with the pollster Dustin Olston. But first, our top stories here this morning. And police are warning of an unprecedented rise in the threat from terrorism. According to the UK's most senior counter-terrorism officer, Israel's war in Gaza has radicalised Islamist extremists. American actor Alec Baldwin faces new charges of involuntary manslaughter. Cinematographer Helena Hutchins was killed in 2021 when a prop gun Baldwin was holding went off. And the Met Office has issued a danger to life warning as Storm Isha is forecast to arrive, bringing winds of up to 80 miles an hour and heavy rain. Now, over three-quarters of people have noticed a shrinkflation on supermarket shelves, according to the consumer organisation Which. The watchdog has found that shoppers are now paying 21% more for 17% less. So, in the US, all eyes on New Hampshire as the Republican presidential candidates battle for the support of voters there. Donald Trump, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis are all vying to win their party's nomination, and Tuesday's vote will prove the latest test. So joining me live now from Washington, D.C. is pollster Dustin Olston. So a very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us here today. And a huge amount of focus, understandably, on the Republican nomination after Donald Trump's stunning victory in Iowa. Is this beginning to look like a one-horse race, do you think?
Yeah, I think that was, well, first of all, it was historic. He beat 50%, which means that a majority of the Republicans in Iowa were supporting him. Also, it was the largest margin and largest percentage the Republican has ever gotten in the contest in Iowa. So that has actually shown up. I've been looking at all the polls happening in New Hampshire this week. We had first, right out of the gate, first poll in New Hampshire after the Iowa caucuses. The St. Anselm poll actually showed a 7% bump for Trump out of Iowa. And then we have Suffolk and the Boston Globe have been doing a daily tracking poll. And they've actually shown that Trump has gone up from about 50 to 52% throughout the week, and then Nikki Haley's dropped down to 35%. So it seems like it's his lead is widening, and I can't understand it. But Nikki Haley dropped out of the New Hampshire ABC debate this week, which is at WMUR, which is the only television station exclusively in New Hampshire, and a pretty big deal. And I think that's actually stalled her momentum in the state.
Is it any surprise that Donald Trump is doing well, given that he is a former president? I mean, often former presidents run uncontested, don't they?
Yes, exactly. This is a totally different election. Maybe it's the late 1800s. I think we had an election that was similar to this.
Yeah, it's a really unusual situation.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, this is interesting. This week, people thought that Nikki Haley was practically going to be moving to New Hampshire, but it seems as though she has left the campaign trail somewhat. She stopped the debate. She only had about one event per day. And then Donald Trump, who I think he's enjoying it and he's feeling it. He's had multiple large stadium events, which, you know, that takes a lot to get people there. And also, you know, this week, this is sad, but something he's had to deal with. He's still campaigning full time, is he took the day off on Thursday for his mother-in-law's funeral, but still very active in the state. So you can just tell by the tenor of the campaign that Donald Trump believes that he is the front runner, that he has secured the nomination. And something big that happened yesterday, Friday, in New Hampshire is that Tim Scott, who actually in one of our American Pulse polls, we actually had him as the most popular of the candidates last year in one of our New Hampshire polls. But Senator Tim Scott just came out and endorsed Donald Trump, full-throated endorsement, actually a lot more energetic than he was on the campaign. In fact, very big support, as well as a few other new Republican leaders who've gotten behind his candidacy.
Hi, Dustin. It's Rob Powell here, also in the studio in Westminster. I wonder, have you got any thoughts about what happens if here in the UK, Keir Starmer, the Labour Party leader, wins, someone that's been pretty critical about Donald Trump in the past, and then Trump wins in the US? How do you think that sort of relationship between a more left-wing leader here and Donald Trump could play out on the global stage?
Well, I mean, so this is what we're looking at in the United States right now. You hear this talking point sometimes from Nikki Haley or the left that Trump is the chaos candidate. But the truth is, when he was president, things were pretty stable in this country. And now we're looking at chaos across the world. And, with Joe Biden, the chaos in Afghanistan. In our surveys, voters believe that led to chaos in Ukraine, chaos in Israel. We have chaos within our economy. Like, there's all this turmoil. And the truth is, when Donald Trump was president, he actually worked really well with people like, President Xi of China. So in North Korea, I mean, he was able to work with people who obviously have very different views of the world. And I would expect that to be the case as well with UK.
OK, Dustin Olsen, really interesting to get your take on events. And maybe we'll talk to you again after the New Hampshire primary. But for the moment, thanks very much indeed.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So fascinating to watch what's going on. And Donald Trump clearly doing better than ever, despite all his, in fact, perhaps because of his legal woes, that seems to be boosting his popularity, if nothing else. A question about whether that could derail him further down the line. But his relationship with British politicians is fascinating, especially in an election year.
Yeah, in a year when you've got so many countries going to the polls and potentially, if the rumours are right anyway, the UK voting, like 9-10 days after the US, I think those new relationships that will be forged between leaders will be fascinating to watch. I think ultimately, when it comes to the US and the UK, yes, there might be more tension rubbing up against each other with particular personalities in those two offices, but really the strength of relationship between the two countries means that whoever's there, they tend to get along more or less.
They make it work. Yeah. And anything can happen. It's early days.
Yeah.
We're talking probably November for possibly both.
November the 14th for the UK, potentially, but of course we don't know.
No.
We, of course, know early November for US because that's set in stone, but could be whenever.
Yeah,
maybe May, maybe November, maybe January next year, who knows?
It's going to stretch newsrooms if they happen at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the meantime, let's talk sports, shall we, Jackie? Because Luke Littler is just going from strength to strength.
I know, what a little superstar. So when we were talking about him before Christmas, before he was famous, before he went on this big tear to the final of the World Darts Championships, he had a few hundred followers on Instagram. Now he's on... Guess what he's on? 1.1 million.
Amazing.
And
he deserves it. I mean, what a star.
I know, absolutely. He had to actually employ this week a PR firm, the same PR firm that deals with AJ. That's how big of a star he's become.
And he's 16?
And he's 17.
Oh, 17.
In a couple, he's about to be 17 in a couple of days' time. But just incredible what's ahead for that kid. We're going to be talking about him after this.
Goal! I've spotted an opportunity, found the space and slotted it home. It's what I do. This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Yep, the teenage darts prodigy Luke the Nuke Littler has won his first senior title and become the youngest player to hit a 9-dart finish on television. Well, Littler, who turns 17 tomorrow, beat the three-time world champion Michael van Gerwen in the Bahrain Masters final. Earlier here in the quarterfinals, he hit a 9-darter against Nathan Aspinall, only the second 9-darter ever to be thrown in the World Series. The first one coming from 16-time world champion Phil Taylor. Tells you everything you need to know. Littler won the final 8-5, and next up for him is the Premier League darts, starting on the 1st of February. Britain's Cameron Norrie is going for a place in the 4th round of the Australian Open for the first time in his career. He's up against the 11th seed, Casper Ruud, not Holger Rune, as I said before, getting my Scandies mixed up. A man he's never beaten before. The latest, Norrie took the first set. It is going with serve in the second. He is the last Brit standing in the singles draw, but Lloyd Glasspool is into the men's doubles last 16, and Neil Skupski has reached the same stage in the mixed doubles. Men's second seed, Carlos Alcaraz is through. He beat China's Juncheng Shang. Alcaraz was 2 sets up when Shang retired. And later, the women's top seed, Iga Swiatek, plays Linda Noskova. Now, after 259 days, Brentford's talisman, Ivan Toney, will play tonight on his return from an 8-month ban for breaking the FA's betting rules. Toney will captain Brentford against Nottingham Forest live on Sky Sports Premier League from 5 this evening. Brentford will need his goals. They've only won once in 10 games. He's dying to score some goals.
I'm looking into the eyes of a player that are very committed, very excited and can't wait. And he will also lead the team out of the tunnel. He will be the captain. As I said earlier in these press conferences, that is 99 point something that he will stay here.
It's It's going to be a huge reception for him, for sure. Now, the big injury concern for Liverpool and one of the AFCON favourites, Egypt, Mo Salah, will miss at least 2 games for Egypt with that leg injury sustained the other night. He went off in Egypt's 2-2 draw with Ghana on Thursday. He might be fit to play in the quarter-final should Egypt qualify without him. Sadio Mane scored in a 3-1 win for defending champions Senegal over Cameroon. Senegal moved to the top of Group C and reached the last 16 with a match to spare. Wins also for Guinea and Cape Verde. In the WSL last night, England's Rachel Daly got the only goal as Aston Villa won 1-0 at Leicester. And in the Championship, Liverpool loanee Fabio Carvalho scored the winner as Hull won 1-0 at Sunderland, and that win takes them back into the playoff places. Jordan Henderson says financial considerations were nothing to do with his decision to join Ajax instead of returning to the Premier League. Henderson finalised his switch to the Dutch side when Saudi Arabian club Al Ettifaq agreed to end his 3-year contract after just 6 months.
It had nothing to do with anything else other than a football decision. I felt it was a perfect opportunity for me to come to such a huge club and showcase again what I've tried to do my whole life, and that's dedicate my life to football and try to be as successful as possible.
Glasgow have qualified for the last 16 of rugby's European Champions Cup with an impressive win over Toulon. Glasgow won 29-5 at Scotstoun. They had to win to guarantee they'd reach the next stage and scored 5 tries, 2 of them from Hugh Jones. Bristol's Champions Cup dream is over. They were beaten by Connaught in Ireland. Connaught got their first points of the tournament in a 27-10 win. In the second-tier European Challenge Cup, Gloucester secured a home tie in the last 16 with victory over Castres at Kingsholm. 4 tries saw Gloucester win 35-5 and they go top of Pool 3. Edinburgh reached the knockout stages by winning 31-19 at Scarlets. Edinburgh ran in 5 tries in Llanelli, but finished the match with 13 players. Scarlets are the first Welsh region not to get a single point in the pool stages. Now, some boxing. Britain's Natasha Jonas and her American opponent, Michaela Meyer, both made the weight for tonight's world title fight. Jonas is headlining an arena fight in her home city of Liverpool for the first time. You can catch it live on Sky Sports Arena from 7 p.m. That's very aptly named. Build up to the lunchtime Premier League kick-off between Arsenal and Crystal Palace over on Sky Sports News, and I will see you a bit later on.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. Anyone got gloves in my size? I need 4.
Do stay with us. We've got lots coming up for you here on The Breakfast Show. We're going to be taking another look at the papers. And here with me discussing them today are the CEO of International Marketing Partners, Alison Stewart-Allen, and we've also got the political correspondent for Politics Joe, Ava Santina Evans. More on that after the break.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Sower murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone. I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
So let's take another dive into the papers. Here with me this morning are Alison Stewart, Allan and Ava Santina Evans. Good to see you both back again. And we're kicking off with the Times this time, aren't we, Ava? And their front page focuses on the army or military.
Yeah, so this is European generals have questioned whether Britain can still be a top fighting force because new analysis has said that there's going to be fewer than 70,000 soldiers available in the next couple of years.
Is that the reason the number's going down? Is that policy, or is it just that they can't recruit people?
Well, apparently it's a lot to do with recruitment. So recruitment has been outsourced to a company called Capita, and Mark Francois, who's the chair of the Defence Select Committee, has said that they should have their funding taken away. They were just given another £140 million grant, and he's arguing that they shouldn't have had that because recruitment's down. But what's interesting about this is the focus on European generals being upset by this news. But, the NATO budget or the NATO benchmark for defence spending is 2%. And I think that there are only 3 countries in Europe who actually spend over 2%. I think that's Poland, Estonia and the UK. If you look around Europe, Germany is spending about 1.3% of their GDP on defence. So if anything, top fighting force, OK, so perhaps we might not have the numbers to put boots on the ground, but I would say that the country can still defend itself, which is what NATO's benchmark is for participating in the Union. And also a lot of this is intelligence now. You're fighting with intelligence. And so you might not necessarily need boots on the ground, but you need people fighting, online.
I mean, Lord Dannett, former head of the army, has written for the Times as well, and he's talked about the deterrent effect, apart from anything else, just saying if you look like a big fighting force, you're less likely to be under attack, and said there are lots of warnings there. And he talks about the recruitment thing and says you need to pay people more. You need to give them better conditions to try to attract people to the forces. That's some of his points he's making.
Although increasingly these tussles or geopolitical disagreements play out online. So cyber is where they're spending a whole lot of money. BAE Systems and other players like this are, recruiting every graduate they can get their hands on that has any capability in the AI space and cyber.
Yeah, cyber warfare, a very big issue.
Yeah.
Alison, take us to the front page of the Daily Express.
Yeah.
This is another appeal from Esther Ranson.
It is. So Esther Ranson herself, unfortunately, has been diagnosed with lung cancer. And she is keen that the laws on assisted dying in the UK are changed. They're debated and that they're changed because at the moment, if you play a role in helping someone end their life, you potentially can go to jail for 14 years. And many other countries in Europe have changed their laws so that that is not the case. And she is hoping that that debate and change of law happens here. So she has launched a petition. She so far has had 71,000 members of the public sign this. But as soon as you get to 100,000, that triggers a debate in the Commons about the law. And that's really what she's pushing for, is not just the debate, but ultimately to change the law so that it's a bit more modern, especially with an aging population. Here in the UK, obviously continental Europe, the Netherlands in particular was ahead of the pack in passing legislation that removed convictions for those that assist people that want to end their lives because they have terminal conditions.
And she is an extraordinary woman, isn't she? Because she spent her life kind of campaigning for different causes and standing up for groups of people. And even when she's facing this diagnosis, she's still fighting, isn't she?
Yeah.
And she has really kind of opened up a debate. Lots of politicians have got involved and expressed sympathy with her views. But there are still going to be some people that say they worry about a law like this, that there'll be some people who feel pressurised to end their lives before they actually feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah.
Any time that this has come up in Parliament, and I think the last time was in a Westminster Hall debate, which is not quite in the main House of Commons, it's an adjacent hall. The concern is coercion or pushing your older relatives into taking this assisted suicide. I mean, I don't know how you combat that. I don't know what the figures are for countries that do have assisted dying, but also how would you quantify that?
Yeah. So it's a debate that needs to happen anyway.
It is.
People feel very strongly about it generally, don't they? Let's move on to The Guardian. And Ava, their lead story, they claim it as an exclusive, and it's all to do with green laws.
Yeah, so this is part of the retained EU law bill where we're scrubbing off EU laws that we had. So post-Brexit, we're now sovereign and we're now commanded by our own laws. This is now affecting green policy. So The Guardian have found that water in Britain will be dirtier than in the EU. There'll be more pesticides in Britain's soil. And there's a big concern about what chemicals companies are allowed to keep pumping out. So the EU have tightened regulations on what is safe for the environment and what isn't. And apparently, if we get rid of this law, when it's lost in this EU retained bill, that means that we will be less green. But, you know, this will be a big story for Michael Gove. Michael Gove has long fought against peat, and he's very interested in ground soil and what chemicals we're putting into the earth. So it'll be interesting to see over the next week if he has anything to say on it.
Is it the case that they get rid of the laws and then introduce other ones that perhaps introduce different standards or new standards or the same standards? I mean, is there sort of a hiatus while you're waiting for different regulations to come in? So what has been happening over the past couple of years is sort of a copy and paste system. So, you know, you're just basically transitioning the law, but you're bringing it under the guise of the UK. But however, because this is regulations that have come in the past couple of years in the EU, it wouldn't be something we already had in place, so it would naturally translate over, and that's what the issue is. So it'd be interesting to see what does get done about that, yeah. Alison, Fujitsu... Yeah. Under the spotlight because of the post office scandal. Yep. And we saw an executive in the inquiry yesterday.
Yes, exactly. So...
this is an article in the FT, I should say.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, that's OK. So the head of the Fujitsu operation in Europe, their chief exec, Paul Patterson, has basically said that he knows now that the company knew from as early as 1999 that the Horizon system had bugs and defects, and also that Fujitsu tampered with witness statements of its own people.
Yeah, he certainly said that they were altered by others.
Yes,
but we don't know
quite what that means. But basically, it's really interesting to me if I think about the business leaders that I'm advising, who thankfully aren't in this situation, by the way, but if they ever were, the fact that you could potentially be this transparent. Now, Mr. Patterson has license to be this transparent because he's new. And as the new person, you can often change things very radically because you are the new regime. And it's very clear to me in reading this and other stories about what Fujitsu's trying to do that he's taking full advantage of the fact that the company is in deep trouble. It is now withdrawing from future public sector contracts, and that if you don't act now to clean this up, that this is going to be a very long-running death by 1,000 cuts for Fujitsu. So him tackling or trying to address it now is the right thing for him to be doing.
Yeah, and as we say, a lot of heat on them at the moment with that inquiry ongoing.
Yep.
We've just got a minute, but let's, Ava, go to the Eyes front page because they've got a poll about the Rwanda policy.
Yeah, so this is the news that only 1 in 5 voters think that Sunak's Rwanda plan will ever come to fruition. So only 1 in 5 people think that anyone will actually be put onto a plane. Now, that's interesting because this week, during the big furore that erupted in Parliament over the third reading of the Rwanda bill, Rishi Sunak was asked repeatedly, will anyone be put onto a plane before the election? And he couldn't give an answer. So, you know, actually 1 in 5 is probably a little bit generous. Also, another 1 in 5 believe the policy will deter Channel small boat crossings. So that means that, you know, 4 in 5 don't think it will have any effect. Now, you've got to remember, this is a £400 million policy we're now looking at. So, you know, if no one actually thinks it's going to work, is it really worth the time?
Well, yeah, and no doubt the debate about all of this policy will carry on while we wait to see whether a flight will take off. Obviously, it's going to go through the Lords first, and it may hit a few issues there as well, mightn't it? I think we're out of time. Are we out of time? Yeah, we're out of time. But you're back in the next hour.
We are.
Fantastic. Alison and Ava, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Moment. See you in an hour's time. Right now, though, we're going to take a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, all changed this weekend as snow and ice are replaced by wind and rain with the arrival of Storm Isha on Sunday. Overnight cloud and rain will spread across Ireland into western parts of Britain by Saturday morning.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Don't go away, lots coming up for you at the top of the hour. We've got all the top stories coming up for you after this short break, with the warnings about a rise in the terrorism risk. Hello, a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on today's show, we're talking about an unprecedented rise in the terror threat.
And why a former head of the British Army is warning that we risk a repeat of the 1930s.
Plus in sport, Britain's Cameron Norrie is going for a place in the last 16 of the Australian Open tennis for the first time in his career.
It's Saturday, the 20th of January. Police warn that the war in Gaza has energised Islamist extremists. Hollywood star Alec Baldwin faces new manslaughter charges over the death of a cinematographer on the set of Rust. The big freeze is over, but here comes the storm. The Met Office issues a danger to life warning with 80-mile-an-hour winds on their way. Mouthwash, tea bags and sausages all fall victim to shrinkflation as retailers cut costs.
And in sport, teenage darts prodigy Luke Littler has won his first senior title at the Bahrain Masters and becomes the youngest player to hit a 9-dart finish on television.
Hello, very good morning and welcome to The Breakfast Show. Police are warning of an unprecedented rise in the threat from terrorism. According to the UK's most senior counter-terrorism officer, Israel's war in Gaza has radicalised Islamist extremists. They say the needles on the dashboard are moving in the wrong direction. Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Rob, who's been looking at this story. And it's a bit of a stark warning for a Saturday morning, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a briefing that Matt Jukes has given to journalists. Now, Matt Jukes is probably the most senior counter-terrorism officer in the country, and he says that events overseas, especially the war going on between Israel and Hamas, is increasing essentially the number of intelligence reports coming in regarding domestic terror threats. He says there's been a 25% increase. And it is pretty alarming language. What he says is it's hard to remember a more unstable, dangerous and uncertain world. I've not seen the conditions collide in the way we have in the last months during my tenure. Now, in terms of the numbers involved, he talks about the period since the October the 7th Hamas attack in Israel and says that there were 3,000 referrals for what he terms objectionable material, peaking at a 15-fold increase compared to the same period the previous year. Now, not all of those go through to prosecution or even to be taken forward as potentially criminal material or intelligence. He says that about 700 of those were identified as potentially in breach of legislation. But says part of the problem is they're having to bring a lot more people in to work on this stuff because counter-terrorism policing is basically looking for needles in haystacks. And when the haystack is getting so much bigger, that puts a big stress on resource.
Yeah, absolutely. And meanwhile, also warnings today about our wider security, if you like, and the strength of our defence capabilities.
Yeah, linked stories. I think if this warning is about the domestic threat, then what Lord Dannatt, the former head of the British Army, is writing about in the Times today is a similar thing, but on a global level. He is essentially calling for more to be invested in defence, more to be spent on recruitment into the army, more to be spent on equipment. And he makes quite a stark parallel, which he says is a parallel that he doesn't make lightly. He compares it to the 1930s and says the woeful state of British defence back then meant that we weren't able to or didn't deter Hitler or stop the Holocaust from happening. And he makes a parallel with now and looks at other big superpowers and potential threats, Russia, China, and says, look, unless we really invest in defence, then we may be in a similar position on the global stage where essentially we don't have the punch, we don't have the firepower to have a deterrent effect to stop conflicts actually happening. So two quite alarming warnings, both at home and abroad this morning.
Yeah, lots of questions, actually, that we can put to the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. He's going to be on Trevor's show tomorrow. That's Trevor Phillips, of course, his show at 8:30 tomorrow morning. So you can watch the interview with the Defence Secretary from 8:30 tomorrow morning. So that's going to be really interesting timing for that interview. In the meantime, one of our other top stories today concerns the American actor Alec Baldwin, of course.
Yeah, more than 2 years since Helene Hutchins was tragically killed on that film set. And there seems to have been so many ups and downs in this. You sort of feel for Helene Hutchins' family, really, because at one point it seemed like he wasn't going to get all the charges were dropped, and now Alec Baldwin being indicted again.
Yeah, the charges were dropped a year ago, but that is one of our main stories today, that the American actor Alec Baldwin faces new charges of involuntary manslaughter. Helene Hutchins was killed in 2021 when a prop gun that Baldwin was holding went off. Our US correspondent, James Matthews, has more.
Alec Baldwin has always said that he pulled the hammer of that weapon but didn't pull the trigger. Charges of involuntary manslaughter were laid against him, but they were dropped in April. Prosecutors then said there was evidence that the gun had been modified and could have malfunctioned. But further tests were instructed on the weapon, and they found evidence that the trigger had indeed been pulled, concluding that given the test findings and observations reported, the trigger had to be pulled or depressed sufficiently to release the fully cocked or retracted hammer. Alec Baldwin has duly been charged once more with involuntary manslaughter. He's not the only one connected to that movie who is facing criminal charges. The weapons supervisor on set faces trial on involuntary manslaughter. Her trial is due to begin in February. In terms of the latest developments, they've been welcomed by lawyers for the family of the woman who died, saying that they have always wanted to know what happened on that fatal day. As for Alec Baldwin, we haven't heard from him directly, but in a statement his lawyers say, we look forward to our day in court.
Japan has become the 5th country to successfully land on the surface of the moon, but not everything has gone according to plan. The lander's solar panels have failed and its batteries are now running out. Tata Steel has confirmed that up to 2,800 jobs will go when it shuts down its 2 blast furnaces at Port Talbot. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says the alternative was the entire plant being closed, but Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford is calling for the UK government to return to the table to try to save more jobs. A huge fire has broken out at an industrial estate in Bridgend in South Wales. Witnesses reported hearing explosions and seeing heavy smoke. The Welsh Ambulance Service said there were no injuries. Now, over 3/4 of people will have noticed shrinkflation on supermarket shelves. I know that Rob's noticed it in his crisp packets. This is according to the consumer organisation Which. Alice Porter has been going through all the details. I'm picking on Rob and his crisps because this is one of the issues, isn't it? That crisp packets have fewer crisps in them, but charging pretty much the same.
Yeah, exactly. You're paying more money, but getting less for your money. And unfortunately, these are all examples here of shrinkflation. So this used to be, this packet of crisps here, this used to be 150 grams, and that's now gone down to 130 grams. So it's quite sneaky. It's only a small difference, but you're paying more and you're getting less. So there you go, you have some crisps.
Making these next time.
Exactly.
Not long to wait, Rob.
Exactly.
Put your name on them.
And if you wanted one of these brunch bars, so at the moment, if you bought one of these, you'd have 5 bars in it, but there used to be 6.
For the same price?
For you could be paying more money for per bar, but actually getting less.
I sort of feel it should be an even number. Is that just me? It's like putting your volume on your TV on an odd number. It just feels a bit weird.
Maybe families of 5 are very grateful.
Oh, I guess.
Saves fighting over the 6th one. But people do notice this kind of thing, I think, don't you? Don't you think people notice when they open a packet of crisps and there's fewer in there?
I was making trifle at Christmas and we always put a flake on the top. I couldn't get a flake, so I bought a twirl. And I opened it, I couldn't believe how small it was. It's like a little stompy twirl now. It used to be like a decent size.
Yeah, but the packaging always looks really big, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The thing.
Well, there's also skimpflation. Are you aware of skimpflation?
I hadn't been till today, but
well, let me tell you, these are both examples of skimpflation, which is when manufacturers, they skimp on the more expensive products. So, for example, here, these sausages, these used to be 97% pork. Now they're just 90% pork.
What's the rest?
What's the rest? That's what is the next question, isn't it?
Jackie, don't look.
So that's skimpflation. I mean, it's kind of interesting because there's a bit of a battle, isn't there, between the retailers who are trying to keep their profits high, but also the manufacturers. For example, Yo Valley, they were saying it's getting really expensive. Their costs are going up, their production costs are going up, and that's why they're having to, they say, keep it affordable for people by shrinking the product.
Well, yes, and maybe some people do think I would rather pay less, even if the product's not exactly the same as it was before.
Wouldn't you rather it taste nicer?
Well, I would, but then if you haven't got enough money, then I guess maybe you would be prepared to compromise.
I was doing some research, so I had something to talk about that didn't involve crisps.
But we've still brought them in for you.
There is another term as well called drinkflation that I'd read a few articles about.
That sounds awful.
Where the alcohol content slightly dips in certain drinks. Someone had noticed like a bottle of gin went from 43.1 to 41.3. Although I do wonder whether they just printed that wrong and it hasn't actually changed.
I'd definitely notice that if it was gin. Anyway, this is an issue. We're going to keep the crisps away for Rob from now, and the sausages. He can have his breakfast a little bit later. Alice, thanks very much indeed. Now, the number of young people approaching their council as homeless or about to become homeless has risen in the last year, according to research by the homelessness charity Centrepoint. Amelia Harper has this report.
I was in the train station, underground, about to walk in front of a train and someone stopped me.
Homelessness nearly ended Ben's life. Aged 19, accused of a crime he didn't commit, he found himself kicked out of home and onto the streets.
That false accusation hit me hard because, first of all, it's something I wouldn't do. And then when I was on the streets, I basically had no help. went from something to nothing real quick. I was sectioned. I was sectioned for a week because of my sleep deprived and anxiety. And after that, I was put in like an emergency accommodation for like a week.
Hello. How are you today? Now supported by New Horizon Youth Centre in London, Ben's story isn't uncommon. He's just one of those at the heart of a mounting youth homelessness crisis. Centres like this provide a safe haven for people without a home, but they're under more pressure because homelessness among young people has risen dramatically over the last year. In 2021-22, the number of 16 to 24-year-olds who told their council they were homeless or about to become homeless was 129,000. But just 1 year later, that number rose by nearly 7,000. It means that a new young person faces homelessness every 4 minutes. To combat this, 120 charities have backed a petition urging the government to create a national youth homelessness strategy.
We don't need statistics to tell us what's happening. We see this every day at New Horizon Youth Centre. Just in December, we had double the amount of people coming through our doors as the previous December. The situation is just escalating. And, you know, we're fed up of... I arrive at the centre and sometimes I have to step over people in sleeping bags. We're fed up of having young people crying, feeling suicidal with nowhere to go.
Young homeless people are asking for help and the numbers needing it are rising. There is support out there, but charities warn without more, the crisis could reach boiling point. Amelia Harper, Sky News.
Now, the UK Health Security Agency has declared a national incident following a warning from its chief executive that vaccination rates against measles are well below the level set by the World Health Organization. So let's find out a little bit more about this. Joining me now is the GP, Dr. Josephine Sauvage. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us today. How concerned do you think we should be about this rise in measles cases?
Good morning, Anna. Yes, so I think obviously anxiety should be measured, but I think we should take this opportunity to do everything we can to prevent any further escalation in numbers. Certainly over the last 2 years, we have seen increasing numbers of measles cases across the United Kingdom. And at the moment, we've seen some increasing numbers, particularly in the West Midlands. And London is particularly worried because measles is a highly infectious disease. It's transmitted very quickly. It also is a serious disease. And we have low levels of immunity within our population.
Well, yes, and for a lot of people, they won't have come across measles in their lifetime. So remind us what it does to you. What are the symptoms? How serious can it be?
So to begin with, it could appear just as a viral illness, so a temperature, a sore throat, runny nose, a mild cough. But over a period of about 4 days, your temperature can go very, very high, and then a rash develops. Now, we haven't seen measles, certainly not in my lifetime. And so people can often confuse it with a normal viral infection. But of course, in some cases, it can make children very, very ill. We're seeing in the West Midlands a significant proportion of young and older children needing hospitalisation. And in some small number of cases, it can be a fatal disease, but it is completely preventable by immunisation. So that has to be the focus of our attention now.
Well, yes, so this is simply, is it, just about people choosing not to take up the vaccination for their children?
I think nobody's at fault. I think that we've just emerged from a global pandemic. I think people have forgotten about the importance of measles, and so therefore remembering that this is an important part of the immunisation programme, it has played a factor. I think sometimes people just forget, or, you know, lives are busy, and so people have not come forward. Historically, also, there has been concern about the MMR in the past, which has meant that some of our older children, our teenagers, are equally unimmunised. But certainly all of that early concern has now been discredited, and we are now absolutely clear that it is a safe and effective vaccine and certainly key to the prevention of any epidemic in this country.
So your advice to anyone who's watching who thinks, I need to update, get my child vaccinated, I need to have a look at their vaccination record and check, what would your advice be to them this morning?
Yes. So I would say, first of all, you can check in your parent health record whether your children have had the vaccine. I think the vaccine is available for everybody, irrespective of their age, and even older teenagers in that 19 to 25-year-old age group. If you've missed out on your vaccine, come forward, contact your GP. If you're not registered with a practice, it doesn't matter. Contact your local GP practice, whether you're registered or not, and they will signpost you on how to get the vaccine done. If you've got worries, any worries at all about side effects of the vaccine or even the nature of the vaccine, I know that some vaccines do contain animal products, which some people are reluctant to have. There are other vaccines available. There are lots of options. And we're here to dispel any anxieties, to answer questions and to signpost you into the best way to get it done.
Well, Dr. Josephine Sauvage, thanks so much for joining us today and giving us such helpful advice. We do appreciate it. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Anna. Goodbye.
And I'm old enough to remember when people did have measles. I know in my childhood, I remember my best friend having measles and having to be in a darkened room because her eyes were very painful and with an eye mask on in the dark. So it definitely was around, but quite rare.
People have forgotten about it, haven't
yeah,
they?
I think that's one of the issues.
When I was immunising my children, it was the MMR scare, and I waited until before they went to school to give them the MMR, but they are now vaccinated, albeit, late. I'm wondering...
Our children were in that 90s kind of
period.
But
I'm wondering if it's maybe a difficulty now. It's tricky to get a doctor's appointment, isn't it? You've got to jump through a lot of hoops, and maybe some people just stay away from GPs if they possibly can, because it's just tricky.
Yeah,
as the doctor was saying,
that's
interesting.
From our surgery, actually. We took our daughter quite recently for her boosters, I think. But
yeah,
I was reading about how quickly it spreads as well. They had a sort of blast from the past about talking about our numbers during the COVID pandemic. And apparently measles in a population without immunity, its R number is 15. So one person on average gives it to 15 other people. I think COVID in an unimmunised population was about 3. So I guess that's why it's such a risk. It can really rip through schools when lots of kids are close together if they don't have immunity.
And why it's so important to keep that vaccination rate high. Yeah, it's a big issue, isn't it? We're going to take a look now at what the weather's up to, and there's a storm on the way, so stay tuned.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, yes, all changed this weekend. Snow and ice are replaced by wind and rain with the arrival of Storm Isha on Sunday. Overnight cloud and rain will spread across Ireland into western parts of Britain by Saturday morning, bringing an ice risk and hill snow to parts of Scotland. Much of England and Wales will be cold and dry with patchy freezing fog.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come here on The Breakfast Show. We've got lots for you, including more on the fact that the big freeze may be over, but the Met Office is now issuing this danger to life warning ahead of Storm Isha. And the UK military has used laser weapons against aerial targets for the first time. We'll be hearing from a military analyst.
We all live in an uncertain world. From global conflict and crises to moments full of hope and unity. We'll take you to the heart of the story and help you understand the world around us. Join me, Yalda Hakim, on my new show, The World, on Sky News.
Obviously, with New Year's resolutions and everything, I think there's the hardest part for people when it comes to like diet and dry January. When it comes around this time, that's when people really start to struggle and think, can I really go through the whole month? So reading the articles I've read now about Blue Monday, I think the biggest challenges are people working, in jobs, struggling financially, and then that post-Christmas slump of, oh, I'm not feeling very merry, you're not really around family that you may have been around Christmas. And so I can understand why people might go through it. I haven't really experienced it myself. I feel good.
You've done Dry January before, haven't you?
I have. I did it last year. So when I did Dry January last year, it was for a campaign for water aid. So it was more on the focus of more water rather than actually cutting out alcohol. So I actually cut out coffee, tea, fizzy drinks, juice. And I was drinking just water to promote,
You
how
were a lot of
important.
fun, weren't you?
I'm always fun.
I'm sure that's true, actually.
Just to promote how good water is. So yeah, dry January, from what I've heard from my friends who are doing it this year, I think they're really struggling with the terms of just situational, like, or me, I'm a big sports person. So, the playoffs are happening and people watching games at the pub, you're just, inclined to have a drink with your mates and you just can't, you're drinking water and people are like, come on, just have one, it's just one, mate. I think that kind of pressure and stress is why a lot of people fail dry January. The price of low alcohol and non-alcoholic drinks is actually going up, which is good because it's said to favor people who are more heavy drinkers and they're going for, alcohol-free gin and alcohol-free beer and other drinks, which is great. I haven't actually tried it myself, but apparently they taste exactly the same. But obviously the medical benefits that we know as doctors are, you don't have the short-term and long-term negative effects of alcohol consumption. As you mentioned, the issue is the socioeconomically less developed groups are the groups who are at higher risk of a poor prognosis from alcohol-related disease, chronically and acutely. And so if they can't afford these alcohol-free drinks, they're going to go for the cheaper alternative, which is to have the alcohol. And that's what we're trying to steer them away from. You're almost defeating the aim if you can't access the demographics that you're actually trying to target.
Hello, welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, I'm going to be joined by a military analyst and former colonel in the British Army after the UK military has carried out its first high-power firing of a laser against aerial targets.
And we'll bring you the sport as well. Luke Littler has done it again. His star is just continuing to rise. He's absolutely brilliant.
There's no stopping him. He's quite extraordinary.
Yes.
First, though, we're going to give you more on the weather because the Met Office has issued a danger to life warning as Storm Isha is forecast to arrive this weekend, bringing winds of up to 80 miles an hour as well as heavy rain. So let's bring in Joe, our meteorologist, to tell us more about what's to come. So the cold is out and warm but stormy in.
That's exactly right. The cold, the snow, the ice, that's all out, that's all gone. People will notice this morning that it's certainly not nowhere near as cold as it has been recently. No hard frost this morning. But yes, all change, I'm afraid. We're going to see the jet stream bringing spells of wind and rain. There are warnings in place. Widely across the UK, we've got yellow warnings of strong winds.
And remind us what a yellow warning means, as opposed to some of the... That's the
less one. Yes. So then the amber is there's more impact, and basically the warnings are done on impact. So they will take into account things like the time of day, day of the week, things like that. So there's lots of factors to include. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So timing does have an impact on it. So it's an impact-based warning. So yes, they go up from the yellow up to a red, being the most severe weather warnings. But there is an amber quite widely across the UK, stretching from Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, down into parts of Wales and the southwest. And there is also an amber warning for parts of the southeast on Monday as well, for the strong winds there as the storm's clearing away. So yes, some big impacts, and it will affect quite a large part of the UK. And it's not just the strong winds; it's the heavy rain as well.
Yeah, and mostly overnight Sunday night, is that right?
Yeah, so the strongest winds will be overnight, Sunday night into Monday morning. Again, like I said, clipping the southeast Monday morning, so could bring some disruption there. So it is mostly overnight, which is good news. But as you can see, there's still an amber warning out for that. So even though people, will probably be off the road, most people will be at home, hopefully on a Sunday evening, it will be strong winds and disruption possible.
How serious is an amber warning? Is it trees down sort of wind?
Yeah.
Because the last storm, whenever it was, a couple of weeks ago, we were sitting there going, oh, isn't this awful? It's so windy.
Oh, yes.
And then
I remember Hank.
A tree fell on the pub.
Oh,
and then everybody on the family WhatsApp was going, the tree's falling on the pub! Yeah. It was an absolute catastrophe. I mean, it was a big tree.
Yeah.
Well, I got 2 scarecrows for Christmas from my allotment. And when Henk was coming in, I was like going past them I was going up to the plot every few hours. I was like, where are you going?
Did they survive it?
I'm going to check on your scarecrows again. They did survive it, yeah.
Oh, good going.
Well, I know someone who drove home and came home and the tree was down in their front garden.
So it's that bad again?
Yeah, potentially we could see trees down, problems with power supply, things like that. So, yeah, tricky conditions, I'm afraid.
OK, well, Jo, stay with us because we're talking about teaching children cooking and learning cooking from our parents. And the inspiration for this is... I'm not going to test you on any recipes or anything, it's fine. It's because it's about the Beckhams and the eldest boy, Brooklyn, is saying that it's his father, David, who taught him how to cook. It's done a sit-down interview with The Times, and he said he found his calling in the kitchen over lockdown. And some of you might follow him on Instagram. He has been sharing recipes. Here's an example of it here, I think. He's called the series Cooking with Brooklyn. And here's an example of quite a well-done steak there, I'd say. Yes. But obviously this is... But he says it's David rather than Victoria that is his inspiration.
Yeah.
And you've got some experience of talking to David Beckham in the past about
back in the day when David was first with Victoria, they had their flat and he was, the rising star of Manchester United. I'd say, what you do now, you're going home to make your dinner. Do you actually cook? And he went, yeah, I can do noodles and everything. So he's literally super noodles. But I think he's really good friends with Gordon Ramsay. So he
Do you reckon he's given him a few tips
lessons. And if you watch that documentary on Netflix,
yeah,
he's always fiddling around in the kitchen,
he's got his
isn't he?
Outside.
We were talking about Luke Littler earlier, weren't we? Didn't he say he eats the same thing before he goes and plays darts? He has an omelette and then a pizza and then
Doesn't
he goes
have a celebratory kebab afterwards.
Yeah.
I think that was
he
right.
doesn't cook it himself, though. No.
I don't have time to cook.
Oh, do you not?
Yeah, no. For time, yeah.
I think when my kids go into uni, I thought it was important to send them off at least with maybe 3 things they could cook so they wouldn't starve. Like I would think a basic is a bolognese and a chilli because that's very similar to a bolognese and maybe one kind of casserole or a tagine or something like that. So they know how to make those.
Even if they eat chips instead. Who knows?
When I went to university, one of my friends asked whether, when cooking chicken nuggets, are they allowed to touch each other when you put them in the oven?
Did you say yeah?
I mean, I'm assuming they are. They don't, merge together or something, if you like.
I don't think there's a rule. I think it's fine.
Yeah, it's only nuggets. They will be fine. I wonder if Luke Littler likes chicken nuggets. I've got a sneaky feeling that he probably does. When he was a runner-up at the World Championships, his celebratory kind of slap-up meal was a milkshake and a packet of Doritos.
Oh,
it's my kind of
can't go wrong.
Meal,
can't go wrong.
It's crisps again.
Yeah, it's back to super crisps again. Luke Littler has become the youngest player to throw a perfect 9-dart leg on television, but could he be winning his first professional title after 259 days? Brentford prepared to welcome back their talisman Ivan Toney to the Premier League today. What a welcome he's going to get. And Glasgow tried to book their spot in the Champions Cup knockout stages. All to come.
Hello, welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up in just a moment, I'm going to be speaking to a defence and military analyst, Simon Diggins, about the UK's use of lasers against aerial targets. Then we've got all the sport, haven't we?
Yeah, it's a big day for Ivan Toney. He's waited 8 months to play football again. He must be literally chomping at the bit to get out there for Brentford after a ban for breaking gambling rules. And he will play again today for the first time. And can you imagine the reception he's going to get? It's going to be immense.
They'll be happy to see him back, won't they? They've had a more difficult time.
Yeah,
lately.
much more difficult time. And he scores goals. They need them.
So more on that in a moment. But let's fill you in on the top stories first this morning. And police are warning of an unprecedented rise in the threat from terrorism. According to the UK's most senior counter-terrorism officer, Israel's war in Gaza has radicalised Islamist extremists. American actor Alec Baldwin faces new charges of involuntary manslaughter. Helena Hutchins was killed in 2021 when a prop gun that Baldwin was holding went off. An upgraded amber wind warning has been issued for large parts of the UK this weekend. The Met Office has issued a danger to life warning as Storm Isha is forecast to arrive, bringing winds of up to 80 miles an hour, as well as heavy rain. And over 3/4 of people have noticed shrinkflation on supermarket shelves, according to the consumer organisation Which. The watchdog has found that shoppers are now paying 21% more for 17% less. Now, the UK military has carried out its first high-power firing of a laser against aerial targets. The weapon uses an intense beam of light to cut through drones. The Ministry of Defence has said the latest trial of the Dragonfire system marks a major step in bringing this technology into service. So let's find out a little bit more about how it works. I've got the military analyst Simon Diggins here with me. Morning to you, nice to see you. So the Dragonfire system, tell us all about it. What's it capable of?
Well, it's capable of engaging multiple targets, and particularly with drones. And we've seen in Ukraine, we've seen in the fighting that's been going on in Israel and Gaza, and particularly last week when the attack on HMS Diamond, the British ship that was in the Red Sea. Lots of drones fired at the same time, and the only way we could defend ourselves at the time was using very expensive high-powered missiles against it. Now, what this offers here with a laser weapon is basically the ability to knock out lots of these drones very, very quickly and very cheaply every time they use it. The MOD is talking about it costs about the same cost as putting a heater on for half an hour, so about £10. And of course, that doesn't take into account the cost of building it and developing it in the first place. But in comparison with a £1 million missile, it's a major upgrade in terms of our ability.
And they're also pushing the fact that there's less likely to be collateral damage?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, because it only works when it hits the target. And what it's basically firing is a beam of light. And so if there's no target there, just the beam of light just dissipates into space.
And so how soon could this system be ready to use?
As I understand it, they're talking about it being 5 years away from being operational service. Now, that could be speeded up with what they call urgent operational requirements. But 5 years would be, looks like that's a normal development for where they are for the moment. Now, the Navy obviously got a great interest in putting it on their ships. The Army are also interested in it as well. And they all see it as part of a sort of integrated air defence package that they'd want to have for our forces in the future.
Well, yeah, is this UK-only technology?
Well, at the moment they're saying they are. They're saying very much it's kind of sovereign technology. However, it will have come from development with allies, and no doubt if it's effective, I'm sure it is effective, there'll be good export opportunities for it as well, because it's a major issue. Very recently, for example, the Commander-in-Chief of the Ukraine Armed Forces, he talked about why the Ukrainian counteroffensive had not succeeded this summer, and he talked about this new form of warfare, electronic warfare, information warfare, and he specifically mentioned the threat from drones. So it's potentially a very significant improvement in our weapons.
And Ministry of Defence are very keen to talk about it and talk about their shiny new kit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are reading on the front pages of our newspapers today warnings about shrinking armed forces and problems with recruitment.
Our recruitment is a disaster. It's the only way I can describe it, because the combination of poor recruitment, not having retention, and this has been going on for nearly a decade. So, for example, the Army has failed to meet its recruitment targets for nearly 10 years. And that's with a very low baseline and an Army that's shrinking the whole time. And the problem with these things, they kind of tumble. If people get the idea of the Army or the Armed Forces is not a good thing to go and join, or people aren't joining it, they don't join it, more people leave, and the problems become greater and greater from there. We've got a major structural problem with our recruitment in the Armed Forces, and it has a real effect on our defence, and we really absolutely need to sort it out. OK, well, Simon Diggins, I know you're going to be providing expertise for us all day on Sky News, but thanks for dropping in on us here at Westminster. My pleasure. First. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
We've got sport now, Jackie, haven't we?
We have got the sport. It's hard to know.
Talking about precision firing.
Okay, what shall I start with? Let's start with the arrows. And Luke Littler, before Christmas, when he was just a schoolboy that no one really knew, he had a few hundred followers on Instagram because he was, he was good and he was building a reputation. Now, having got to the world final and become the runner-up there, and everyone went, God, this kid's amazing. 1.1 million followers. Yeah. So much so, he's had to hire a specialist PR firm, the same as AJ, actually. He's that big a star.
Yeah, he's going to have a lot of offers, isn't he? Because also he projects himself so well. He's so down to earth, he's calm, he comes over so well.
Yeah, he's just like a normal kid, and I think that's what people love about him. But he does the business when it comes to top-level competition. He actually has nerves of steel. Let's have a look.
Goal! I've spotted an opportunity, found the space and slotted it home. It's what I do. This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
So the teenage darts prodigy Luke Littler has won his first senior title and become the youngest player to hit a 9-dart finish on television. Well, this is what happened. He turned 17 tomorrow. He beat the 3-time world champion Michael van Gerwen in the Bahrain Masters final. Earlier here in the quarter-finals, he hit a 9-darter against Nathan Aspinall, only the second 9-darter ever to be thrown in the World Series. The first came from 16-time world champion Phil Taylor. Tells you all you need to know. Littler won the final 8-5. Next up for him is the Premier League darts. That starts on the 1st of Feb. Britain's Cameron Norrie is going for a place in the 4th round of the Australian Open for the first time in his career. He is up against the 11th seed, Casper Ruud, a man he has never beaten before. Now, Norrie took the first set. Ruud took a very close second set on a tiebreak. But in the last few minutes, Norrie has broken what could be a crucial break in that third set. We'll see. He is the last Brit standing in the singles draw. Lloyd Glasspool is into the men's doubles last 16, though, and Neil Skupski has reached the same stage in the mixed doubles. Men's second seed Carlos Alcaraz is through. The Wimbledon champion beat China's Zhongcheng Shang. Alcaraz was 2 sets up when Shang retired. And the women's top seed, Iga Swiatek, is just getting underway against Linda Noskova. Now, after 259 days, Brentford's talisman, Ivan Toney, will play tonight on his return from an 8-month ban for breaking the FA's betting rules. Toney will captain Brentford against Nottingham Forest, live on Sky Sports Premier League from 5 this evening. Brentford will need his goals. They have only won once in 10 games, and he is desperate to score them.
I'm looking into the eyes of a player that are very committed, very excited, and can't wait. And he will also lead the team out of the tunnel. He will be the captain. As I said earlier in these press conferences, that is 99 point something that he will stay here.
Let's get more on the big injury concern for Liverpool and one of the AFCON favourites, Egypt. Mo Salah will miss at least 2 games for Egypt with a leg injury. Salah went off injured in Egypt's 2-2 draw with Ghana on Thursday. He might be fit to play in a quarter-final should Egypt qualify without him. Sadio Mane scored in a 3-1 win for defending champions Senegal over Cameroon. Senegal moved to the top of Group C and reached the last 16 with a match to spare. Wins also for Guinea and Cape Verde. In the WSL last night, England's Rachel Daly got the only goal as Aston Villa won 1-0 at Leicester. And in the Championship, Liverpool loanee Fabio Carvalho scored the winner as Hull won 1-0 at Sunderland. And that win takes them back into the playoff places. Jordan Henderson says financial considerations were nothing to do with his decision to join Ajax instead of returning to the Premier League. Well, Henderson finalised his switch to the Dutch side when Saudi Arabian club Al Attifaq agreed to end his 3-year contract after just 6 months.
It had nothing to do with anything else other than a football decision. I felt it was a perfect opportunity for me to come to such a huge club and showcase again what I've tried to do my whole life, and that's dedicate my life to football and try to be as successful as possible.
Glasgow have qualified for the last 16 of rugby's European Champions Cup with an impressive win over Toulon last night. Glasgow won 29-5 at Scotstoun. They had to win to guarantee they'd reach the next stage, and they scored 5 tries, 2 of them from Hugh Jones. But Bristol's Champions Cup dream is over. They were beaten by Connacht in Ireland. Connacht got their first points of the tournament in a 27-10 win. And in the second-tier European Challenge Cup, Gloucester secured a home tie in the last 16. The victory over Castres at Kingsholm. 4 tries saw Gloucester win 35-5 to top Pool 3. Edinburgh reached the knockout stages by winning 31-19 at Scarlets. Edinburgh ran in 5 tries in Llanelli, but they finished the match with 13 players. Scarlets are the first Welsh region not to get a single point in the pool stages. And to boxing, Britain's Natasha Jonas and her American opponent, Michaela Meyer, both made the weight for tonight's world title fight. Jonas is headlining an arena fight in her home city of Liverpool for the first time. It is live on Sky Sports Arena, aptly, from 7 o'clock. So build up to the lunchtime Premier League kick-off. That's Arsenal against Crystal Palace over on Sky Sports News, and we'll see you in the next hour.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. Anyone got gloves in my size? I need 4.
Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we're going to take another look at the papers. We're discussing all the stories of the day, not all of them, but as many as we can fit in, with CEO of International Marketing Partners, Alison Stewart-Allan, and we've also got political correspondent for Politics Joe, Ava Santina Evans. More from them after the break.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone. I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Time now to take another look at the morning's newspapers. Here with me today are CEO of International Marketing Partners, Alison Stewart-Allan, and political correspondent for Politics, Ava Santina-Evans. So welcome back to both of you. And we've dealt with a lot of the front pages in previous hours, so we're diving inside this hour. And Alison, you've picked out a story about retail sales volumes and being surprisingly down over Christmas.
Yes, but actually what's interesting is in December, studies and the official stats are saying that retail volumes fell 3.2% in December. However, in November, they went up. And why is that? Because, of course, you have Black Friday deals. So people did it. Of course they did.
And bargains.
Absolutely. And they did get bargains. So because they stocked up in November, when it came to December, the sales are flat. The other more worrying thing, I think, for retailers is that compared to December 2022, this December is down 2.4%. So we are still in the midst of a major economic downturn in the UK. Retailers are looking for ways to be better or different. And, you know, if you're the CEO of a retailer, you're probably going to be pretty worried, especially a consumer or fashion retailer. You're going to be worried by these stats because you better up your game if you want to keep those customers and keep the money coming in.
And while the government's very pleased to say that it's brought inflation down as promised, or it claims it's brought it down, it's certainly come down, that still means the prices are rising, just not as fast.
Yes.
So it's still a big strain on people's pockets, isn't it?
It is.
Take us on, Ava, though, to this is a story in The Eye, is it? Yes, and this is calls for the wealthy to pay more for the BBC licence fee, but who's saying it?
Yes, this is the former Director General of the BBC, Greg Dyke, and he's talking about how, you know, we have made reform to the way that the BBC licence fee is paid before. You know, wealthier pensioners now pay for it, and that was extremely controversial at the time. There was a thought that, you know, pensioners were sacrosanct and they should never have to pay for it. And, you know, those discussions have been happening. He's now suggesting that if you are a wealthier person, then you should contribute more, and then that would mean that people on the lower end of the scale could be alleviated from the cost. Now, it's very expensive. It's, you know, it's £169 a year, which is not very much money if you earn a lot of money. But if you are on the bottom end of the scale, then it is quite a big sacrifice. And, you know, over the past few weeks, we've been seeing a lot of people who've been dragged into court, and some of those testimonials have been released. We've seen those in the papers, and they're heartbreaking. You know, people who are really on the breadline and can't afford to do it, because, of course, it's a crime not to pay for your BBC licence fee. So this is now going to be looked at by the Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser. One thing I worry about with this, when the BBC sort of gets mixed in with the Tory government, it does become political. Some government ministers who don't like the coverage are a bit harsher on the BBC than, say, other ministers who do like the coverage.
Do you think that comes into it? Because, I mean, it's a huge discussion, isn't it? Because it's a national institution and a much-loved institution. So kind of working out a fair way for people to pay, and so the BBC gets enough money, but it's not too expensive for individuals, is going to be a big debate perennially.
Yeah, but the BBC, internationally, is a fantastic asset. You know, if you think about all of the BBC Studios programmes that are shown around the world, the BritBox sort of subscription service in the US that's BBC, absolutely brings BBC content. So further exploitation of BBC content also outside this country will also help defray, hopefully, that expense.
But for the moment, the debate hasn't ended. And interesting, Greg Dyke's intervention on that.
Yeah.
OK, take us, Alison, now to, this is a story in The Guardian about British Gas and the pay of some of the big execs.
It's intriguing. So the head of British Gas, Chris O'Shea, was recently on TV saying that he himself said it's impossible to justify my pay packet.
And this is actually the boss of Centrica, is that right? Which owns British Gas.
That's correct. Correct. And so he earned a base salary of nearly £800,000, but then got a bonus of $3.7 million in 2022 that was just awarded formally. So it's great that he says, I can't really justify this huge amount of money that I've been given. But the next point, therefore, should be, and what are you going to do about that? But the article suggests that he's not going to do anything other than keep the money, and in the same breath as saying that, yes, our customers are really struggling to pay their gas bills.
Yeah.
So from a brand and corporate reputation point of view, this is probably what not to do, is to, on the one hand, say, yes, I'm overpaid.
But people might think, well, that's quite human of him to acknowledge that.
It is human, but you should do something with that. So if you can't justify your own amount of money that you're paid, then the implication is, and therefore I'm going to do something about it and give something back, given our customers are struggling. But if you're a customer and you hear the boss of your company that you are a customer of saying something like this, you can't help but wonder, well, what are you going to do for me?
Yeah, and interesting to see if he does take any action, having said that.
Yeah,
we'll see.
We'll see.
Ava, lots of speculation, and there has been for weeks now, hasn't there, about what the Chancellor might do in the upcoming budget. The speculation here is in the Times about child benefit, potentially more people receiving it, is that right? So that wealthier families might be on the list of people being able to get it now?
Yeah, so this could be one of the big dividing lines between the Conservatives and Labour at the next election. Labour have said that they won't commit to extending the two-child benefit policy, which people on the left have been crying out for and expected the Labour leader to commit to. So now this could be a little bit of electioneering from Jeremy Hunt to sort of reach out and give, extend child benefit. That could really, put the distance between the two of them. But this is going to be in a package of tax cuts that we are expecting to be announced by Jeremy Hunt as we're in the build-up to the election. Of course, backbench Tory MPs have been crying out for tax cuts so that they can go back to their constituents and give them a reason to keep voting for them. But, as we know, tax cuts drive inflation. So, you're kind of between a rock and a hard place there.
Well, yeah, and he's already dropped a few hints, hasn't he, this week, saying that if they can afford them, they will do it. But obviously, he hasn't got all the figures in yet.
No.
And even the suggestion that he might want to try and get two budgets in before an election.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting is if there's an election in November, which your colleague suggested earlier today in your programming, that's quite an interesting thing, to have an election 10 days, 7, 8 days after a US election, which I wouldn't think would be too wise, unless you're trying to not get coverage.
Well, in terms of people's attention.
Yes, and also perhaps the financial markets. Everyone is going to be watching what's going on stateside, including me, for many reasons, including my country's global reputation. But also, the financial markets respond to what comes out of a presidential election. So if you then 8 days later have one here, that seems a little too close. I think I would want to put some distance there.
Journalists will feel quite stretched as well, but no one's going to feel sorry for them, that's for sure. Anyway, Alison and Ava, lovely to have your company this morning. Thanks so much for joining us on our new set. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Very nice.
Let's take a look at the weather now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Only time to tell you that it's all changed this weekend. The snow and the ice are being replaced by wind and rain, and the arrival of Storm Isha on Sunday. Overnight cloud and rain will spread across Ireland into western parts of Britain by Saturday morning, bringing an ice and risk and hail snow to parts of Scotland.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello, a very good morning. It's 9 o'clock. Coming up on today's show, we're talking about an unprecedented rise in the terror threat.
And why a former head of the British Army is warning that we risk a repeat of the 1930s.
Plus in sport, Britain's Cameron Norrie is going for a place in the last 16 of the Australian Open tennis right now for the first time in his career.
It's Saturday, the 20th of January. Police warn that the war in Gaza has energised Islamist extremists. Hollywood star Alec Baldwin faces new manslaughter charges over the death of a cinematographer on the set of Rust. The big freeze is over, but here comes the storm. The Met Office issues a danger to life warning with 80-mile-an-hour winds on their way. Mouthwash, tea bags and sausages all fall victim to shrinkflation as retailers cut costs.
And in sport, teenage darts prodigy Luke Littler has won his first senior title at the Bahrain Masters and becomes the youngest player to hit a 9-dart finish on television.
Hello, very good morning and welcome to The Breakfast Show. Police are warning of an unprecedented rise in the threat from terrorism. According to the UK's most senior counter-terrorism officer, Israel's war in Gaza has radicalised Islamist extremists. They say the needles on the dashboard are moving in the wrong direction. Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who's here with me. So, Rob, a pretty stark warning.
Yeah, this is Matt Jukes, an assistant commissioner, who's given a briefing to journalists where he's essentially laid out the scale of the number of intelligence reports and threats coming in around domestic terrorism and linked it really to global instability and especially the instability in the Middle East since those October the 7th Hamas attacks into Israel. And it paints a very, very worrying picture. I can read out part of what he said to journalists. He said, "It's hard to remember a more unstable, dangerous and uncertain world. I've not seen the conditions collide in the way we have in the last months during my tenure." Now, in terms of the numbers here, Matt Jukes talks about 3,000 referrals coming in for what he calls objectionable material, peaking at a 15-fold increase over the same period compared to the same period last year. Now, not all of those meet the legal thresholds. He says of those, about 700 were identified as potentially breaking legislation. But he says as well as the direct threat, and you should remember that the JTAC terror threat that's looked at independently, that hasn't changed. He says the issue is that counter-terrorism policing is essentially looking for needles in haystacks at the best of times. And when you're getting so much more potential threats coming to the fore, you need to bring in a lot more resources to sift through it and identify sort of where those needles are in this ever-growing haystack.
And this comes at the same time as we're getting warnings about our potential vulnerabilities because of the size and the state of our armed forces.
Yeah, if this warning from Matt Jukes is about the sort of domestic threat, then I think what we've got from Lord Dannatt, the former head of the British Army, in the Times today, is about the situation globally. Essentially, Lord Dannatt is calling for more money to be spent on defence because of instability and threats posed by countries like Russia and China. And he makes a pretty stark parallel and a comparison. And it's one that Lord Dannatt says he doesn't do lightly. He compares the situation now to the 1930s and the run-up to the war and says back then the state of UK defence wasn't enough to deter Hitler from attacking. And he says a similar thing could be happening right now. And I think it's a point that Tory MPs on the backbenches identify. There was a debate earlier this week in the Commons around those strikes in Yemen, where one Tory MP in particular stood up and said, look, all of this means we need to be putting more money into defence. Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, was here almost a week ago talking about the lights flashing on the global dashboard in terms of instability. So it's all worrying language. I guess on the money front, the question for the government is, they are already increasing the amount they're putting into defence. When you are trying to put a lot more money into things like the NHS and education and also trying to cut taxes, how do you make the sums add up?
Yeah, so a lot of questions for the Defence Secretary, which is handy because he is going to be on Trevor Phillips's show tomorrow. He's going to be joining him on the programme in the morning, and you can watch that interview here on Sky News from 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. Lots of issues to be raised with Grant Shapps tomorrow. But in the meantime, another big story today is the charging, once again, of Alec Baldwin over that film Rust.
Yeah, over 2 years now since Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer, tragically lost her life. It seems to have been so many ups and downs. you do feel, I guess, for her family, they're not quite knowing really what's going on.
That's right. Charges were dropped a year ago, but now the American actor Alec Baldwin is facing new charges of involuntary manslaughter. Helena Hutchins was killed in 2021 when a prop gun Baldwin was holding went off. Our US correspondent James Matthews has more.
Alec Baldwin has always said that he pulled the hammer of that weapon but didn't pull the trigger. Charges of involuntary manslaughter were laid against him, but they were dropped in April. Prosecutors then said there was evidence that the gun had been modified and could have malfunctioned. But further tests were instructed on the weapon, and they found evidence that the trigger had indeed been pulled, concluding that given the test findings and observations reported, the trigger had to be pulled or depressed sufficiently to release the fully cocked or retracted hammer. Alec Baldwin has duly been charged once more with involuntary manslaughter. He's not the only one connected to that movie who is facing criminal charges. The weapons supervisor on set faces trial on involuntary manslaughter. Her trial is due to begin in February. In terms of the latest developments, they've been welcomed by lawyers for the family of the woman who died, saying that they have always wanted to know what happened on that fatal day. As for Alec Baldwin, we haven't heard from him directly, but in a statement, his lawyers say, "We look forward to our day in court."
Japan has become the 5th country to successfully land on the surface of the moon, but not everything has gone according to plan. The lander's solar panels have failed and its batteries are running out. Tata Steel has confirmed that up to 2,800 jobs will go when it shuts down its 2 blast furnaces at Port Talbot. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the alternative was an entire plant being closed. But the Welsh First Minister, Mark Drakeford, is calling for the UK government to return to the table to try to save more jobs. A huge fire broke out at an industrial estate in Bridgend in South Wales. Witnesses reported hearing explosions and seeing heavy smoke. The Welsh Ambulance Service said there were no injuries. Over 2/3 of council areas have seen the rates of gonorrhea and syphilis increase since 2017. Analysis by the Local Government Association revealed that the biggest increases were seen in Wigan, Dorset, Somerset and Devon. Councils want the government to provide extra funding for sexual health clinics. Urgent action is needed to stop further outbreaks of measles across towns and cities. Health experts say that vaccination rates across the country have been falling, with particular concerns in some regions, including parts of London and the West Midlands. The UK Health Security Agency is calling for more people to get the jab to prevent the spread of the potentially deadly virus. Yeah, and we're going to be talking a lot about that measles risk a little bit later. But in the meantime, we're talking about shrinkflation. Over 3/4 of people have noticed it, apparently, on supermarket shelves. This is according to the consumer organisation Which. And Alice has been delving into their research, haven't you? And shrinkflation, I mean, it was something that it's probably only been conscious of it in the last few years, maybe months even. But remind us what it is, Alice, because it's something that we're all experiencing.
Yeah, we are. I mean, inflation is the rise in the price of goods, obviously something we've been talking about a lot, particularly in the last year. But shrinkflation is when the price of goods are going up, but the actual goods that you're seeing, they're reducing in size. So if I take this example, this packet of brunch bars, there's 5 in there, but there used to be 6. So you're paying more, but you're actually getting less. And unsurprisingly, lots of people have been commenting on that today, and that's what the Which survey, they did a lot of research on this, and they found a lot of examples. I'm going to pass these ones around here. These are all examples of shrinkflation. So, for example, these crisps used to be 150 grams, and now they're 130 grams. I think a lot of people are feeling frustrated that they're paying more, but actually getting less.
Super sneaky. We like crisps, don't we, Rob?
I know to open this out, right?
Well, go on,
yes. We're off air.
It was always going to happen. Yeah. We are off air at 10 o'clock.
I haven't had any breakfast.
Can I read you a tweet from one of the viewers?
I've hung on to these.
Related tweet. So Karen O'Grady's messaged us and said, I agree. My hula hoops no longer fit over my fingers, which has always been part of my eating experience. I don't know if that, maybe your fingers have got bigger, but hula hoops have definitely got smaller.
Have they?
I mean, they're tiny little
You get the big ones now. Have you seen the big hula hoops? That's the thing now, isn't it?
Okay.
No,
just
me.
Our resident crisp expert, of course.
I'll just be quiet and eat my crisps.
Yeah,
okay,
and there are other examples as well, because it's not just shrinkflation, is it?
There's also
a new word,
skimpflation. And these are examples of skimpflation. Skimpflation is when you skimp on the more expensive ingredients. So in this example here, these pork sausages, they used to be 97% pork, and they're now 90% pork. And then this spreadable butter used to be 54% butter, and it's now 50%. Now, the manufacturers are saying this makes it healthier, so I guess there are some advantages, but also, I guess, for the manufacturers, their costs have gone up. So they're in a difficult situation. What do? And a lot of them are saying that their research shows that actually if you increase keep the items sort of the way that they are, they have to sort of shrink them. Otherwise, the costs will be eaten up by the consumer.
But lots of things taste worse because they've done that. You know,
because of the
someone has agreed
skimpflation.
about the digestive biscuits. They used to taste a lot nicer than they do now. They're probably healthier now. But they taste
someone online
worse.
agreeing with you with that one as well, saying someone else has noticed that digestives. I'm not alone.
It's so disappointing, isn't it? Because it's a little treat, and you're like, oh, not a treat.
This issue of inflation, it feeds into so many different areas, doesn't it? Notice how I'm not giving these back, by the way. Anyway, Alice, thanks very much indeed. Now, the number of young people approaching their council as homeless or about to become homeless has risen in the last year. That's according to research by the homelessness charity Centrepoint. Amelia Harper has this report.
I was in the train station, underground, about to walk in front of a train, and someone stopped me.
Homelessness nearly ended Ben's life. Aged 19, accused of a crime he didn't commit, he found himself kicked out of home and onto the streets.
That false accusation hit me hard because, first of all, it's something I wouldn't do. And then when I was on the streets, I basically had no help. Went from something to nothing real quick. I was sectioned. I was sectioned for a week because of my sleep-deprived and anxiety. And after that, I was put in an emergency accommodation for a week.
Hello. How are you today?
Now supported by New Horizon Youth Centre in London, Ben's story isn't uncommon. He's just one of those at the heart of a mounting youth homelessness crisis. Centres like this provide a safe haven for people without a home, but they're under more pressure because homelessness among young people has risen dramatically over the last year. In 2021-22, the number of 16 to 24-year-olds who told their council they were homeless or about to become homeless was 129,000. But just 1 year later, that number rose by nearly 7,000. It means that a new young person faces homelessness every 4 minutes. To combat this, 120 charities have backed a petition urging the government to create a national youth homelessness strategy.
We don't need statistics to tell us what's happening. We see this every day at New Horizon Youth Centre. Just in December, we had double the amount of people coming through our doors as the previous December. The situation is just escalating. And, we're fed up of... I arrive at the centre and sometimes I have to step over people in sleeping bags. We're fed up of having young people crying, feeling suicidal with nowhere to go.
Young homeless people are asking for help and the numbers needing it are rising. There is support out there, but charities warn without more, the crisis could reach boiling point. Amelia Harper, Sky News.
Well, let's go back to that news about the measles outbreak and the UK Health Security Agency declaring a national incident. Well, we can talk about this a little bit further because I'm joined now by the clinical lecturer at the University of Warwick, Dr. James Gill. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning. How concerning is this rise in cases in your view?
Well, I think it's as much concerning because we're not seeing the vaccination levels we used to do. I think Birmingham Children's Hospital, they've seen 50 measles cases in the last month. we've not seen numbers like that in years. And part of it is, well, the main reason is because we've got a fall off in the MMR vaccine numbers. We need sort of 95% vaccination level in order to keep the communities, to keep people safe, because measles is one of the most transmissible viruses. You're infectious for like 4 days before you show symptoms, and then similarly afterwards. If you're unvaccinated and you're in a room with a child who has measles, there's a 90% chance that your child will also get it. So in some areas of Birmingham, that vaccination level has dropped below 70%. And that's frightening to myself as a doctor. You know, we're potentially going backwards in time. In 2016, in the UK, we'd effectively eliminated measles. We'd consigned it to the history books. And now it's coming back because of confusion about the vaccine. And we really need to make people aware the vaccine is safe and that, you know, we can easily get you access to these vaccines to protect your children.
Yes, because there were scare stories about the vaccine back in the 90s, but they were disproved decades ago. So why do you think there is this slow uptake now of the vaccination?
So people like Andrew Wakefield, who committed, as far as I'm concerned, a horrendous crime against humanity, and that's not hyperbole here, he damaged a life-saving vaccine. That lingers, and you know that sort of low-level belief in it. People aren't sure and they have a worry. Let me be clear, he lied about those vaccines to make money. He has been prosecuted and went to jail for it. He did that much harm. There's also a group of people who are worried about the vaccine because the standard vaccine does contain gelatin. That's not a problem. We have an alternative vaccine for people who don't want gelatin. There's no reason not to have the MMR. It is entirely safe. I will be getting my child vaccinated as soon as he turns 1 to prevent measles, MMR and rubella.
And remind us of why you feel passionately about it, why it's so important. What kind of a disease is this?
On the face of it, it's a virus. So you're getting a temperature, runny nose, cough, the very classic rash, and maybe pink eye conjunctivitis. It doesn't sound too bad. However, up to 40% of children who have serious complications will need hospitalization. It can kill. You can get encephalitis. You can have inflammation in the brain. For some really unlucky children, they have mild measles, and then it can come back to them years later in much more serious forms. Again, that's very rare, but those rare things we really worry about a disease that we have eradicated. There used to be about 1 million children every year used to have measles, and we'd end up with hundreds of deaths. Now we have, if we're very unlucky, 100 cases in a year, and we should have no deaths. As I say, in Birmingham, we've had 50 cases in one hospital already. These numbers are huge for a preventable illness, preventing an illness to children. This should not happen in this day and age.
OK, well, Dr. James Gill, we appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing your views with us here this morning. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue, isn't it? We were talking to a GP as well in the last couple of hours, weren't we, who was saying that the take-up rate of vaccinations clearly has gone down. And she was saying there is concern about animal products. For some people, that's an issue, but there are alternatives and people need to be reassured about that. But also, sometimes it's a case of forgetting or not being able to get an appointment or just the convenience of it as well.
Maybe COVID has something to do with it, where there was quite a lot of scepticism among some people about the vaccine, and then they've kind of lumped all vaccines.
There's a lot more disinformation around now.
There's a lot more of that, and stuff on the internet, and maybe that MMR scare from all those years ago when our children were babies. Maybe that's come back to the surface. Just people are more sceptical of more things.
I think the challenge for government as well is that you don't want to force it too hard because that might backfire. And I think you tend to sort of tell people they have to do something. Sometimes the result you get is the opposite. So it's how to kind of make it, I guess the answer is making it easy and convenient for people to go and get vaccines, sort of like we did during COVID. I think a lot of the reason why so many people did take the vaccine was because it was relatively easy to go and get it. There was vaccine centres everywhere. So it's, I think they call it nudging.
Programmes as well in certain areas that are seen to be more at risk.
It's very scary, though, that what he said, that something that was eradicated, could come back, which is ridiculous.
Need to keep an eye on those vaccination rates at all times, absolutely. Now then, we're going to take a look at the weather, and there is a storm on the way, so it's worth listening.
warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, all changed this weekend as snow and ice are replaced by wind and rain with the arrival of Storm Isha on Sunday. Overnight cloud and rain will spread across Ireland into western parts of Britain by Saturday morning, bringing an ice risk and hill snow to parts of Scotland. Much of England and Wales will be cold and dry with patchy freezing fog. After that cold start in the southeast, most places are in for a breezy day with spells of rain erratically moving eastwards, and there are the weather warnings as we move through the weekend.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Do stay with us. We've still got lots to come here for you on The Breakfast Show, including we're going to be talking with the Mail's football editor, Ian Ladyman, about the return of Brentford's star striker. Jackie's going to be talking to him in just a moment. This, of course, after an 8-month ban.
We all live in an uncertain world. From global conflict and crises to moments full of hope and unity. We'll take you to the heart of the story and help you understand the world around us. Join me, Yalda Hakim, on my new show, The World, on Sky News.
Obviously, with New Year's resolutions and everything, I think this is the hardest part for people when it comes to like diet and dry January. When it comes around this time, that's when people really start to struggle and think, can I really go through the whole month? So reading the articles I've read now about Blue Monday, I think the biggest challenges are people working, in jobs, struggling financially, and then that post-Christmas slump of, oh, I'm not feeling very merry, you're not really around family that you may have been around Christmas. And so I can understand why people might go through it. I haven't really experienced it myself. I feel good.
You've done Dry January before, haven't you?
I have. I did it last year. So when I did Dry January last year, it was for a campaign for Water Aid. So it was more on the focus of more water rather than actually cutting out alcohol. So I actually cut out coffee, tea, fizzy drinks, juice. And I was drinking just water to promote,
you
how
were a
important.
lot of fun, weren't you?
I'm always fun.
I'm sure that's true, actually.
Just to promote how good water is. So yeah, Dry January, from what I've heard from my friends who are doing it this year, I think they're really struggling with the terms of just situational, like, or me, I'm a big sports person. So, the playoffs are happening and people watching games at the pub, you're just, inclined to have a drink with your mates and you just can't, you're drinking water and people are like, come on, just have one. It's just one, mate. I think that kind of pressure and stress is why a lot of people fail Dry January. The price of low alcohol and non-alcoholic drinks is actually going up, which is good because it's said to favor people who are more heavy drinkers and they're going for, alcohol-free gin and alcohol-free beer and other drinks, which is great. I haven't actually tried it myself, but apparently they taste exactly the same. But obviously the medical benefits that we know as doctors are you don't have the short-term and long-term negative effects of alcohol consumption. As you mentioned, the issue is the socioeconomically less developed groups are the groups who are at higher risk of a poor prognosis from alcohol-related disease, chronically and acutely. And so if they can't afford these alcohol-free drinks, they're going to go for the cheaper alternative, which is to have the alcohol. And that's what we're trying to steer them away from. You're almost defeating the aim if you can't access the demographics that you're actually trying to target.
Now, the Met Office has issued a danger to life warning as Storm Isha is forecast to arrive this weekend, bringing winds of up to 80 miles an hour, as well as heavy rain. So time to bring in our meteorologist, Joe Robinson, to fill us in. And Joe, I probably moaned a bit about how cold it was, if I'm honest, but it was absolutely beautiful.
There's
was. Blue, clear skies, but it's all changed now.
It is all changed. And for the majority, it was blue skies, freezing cold, but there was some heavy snow in places. There was up to close to 40 centimetres in northern Scotland, so significant snow. That's melting now. We're going to see some heavy rain, accompanying the weather systems that are moving through, so some heavy rain, strong winds. So, it's all changed, milder conditions, wetter, windier. Yeah. But, yes, it's all about tomorrow, really. The change is today, but tomorrow it's all about Storm Isha and the strong winds, widespread strong winds. The yellow warning covers much of the UK.
Oh, really? So it's for all of us have got to be aware of this.
All of us will be affected by this. Yes, there's a yellow warning covering much of the UK. And then, where we'll see the strongest winds, that's where we've got the amber warning covering parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, down through Wales and into southwest England. And there is a separate amber warning that covers the southeast on Monday morning. So there could be.
And obviously amber more serious than yellow.
Yes,
and
exactly.
it just means stronger winds, does it? More likely to do damage?
Yes, exactly that. So it's the likelihood and the impact. So it's the Met Office have stated that it's medium impact and medium likelihood of, the event happening. So, yes, widely could see 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts and then locally up to 80 miles per hour. And we are keeping an eye on things, forecast models, we've still got a few more hours yet before the system's moving in. So we are keeping a close eye on, potentially could see some stronger winds. So, yes, warnings may be updated today, so we need to keep an eye on that.
Any sense of what happens sort of looking forward a bit longer? Because I guess we can have a cold snap in April before when we've had snow.
We can, and if you look at sort of, the global, things around the globe, if you look at El Nino, things like that, it does suggest that, the latter part of winter is usually... that's when we might see a colder spell. So, if you look at things around, those global drivers, that you could see more settled spells, but colder spells for the end of winter. But for now, even, we've got wet and windy weather this weekend and it's looking unsettled first part of next week. Very wet and windy again on Tuesday, I'm afraid. So.
Keep the fleece on the broad beans for now, then.
For now, but yeah, don't pack anything away.
The fleece on the what?
The broad beans in my allotment. I stuck them in over Christmas. I always do, yeah.
I was thinking, how do broad beans keep you warm? But anyway, I'm with you now. Got you. Well, talking broad beans, that links onto food very neatly. Did you do that deliberately?
Because you don't actually eat broad beans anymore. It's
I
just
love
a
broad
question.
beans. I like them.
We had so many last year that were produced. Yeah, I got a bit sick of them in the end, to be honest. I think there's still
Bring
some
them
in the freezer.
Bring them in. We can put broad beans on our desk. Not for Jackie, though.
Speak for yourself.
And the reason we were going to talk about food is because we're going to talk about Brooklyn Beckham. This is David and Victoria Beckham's elder son, and he's shared in an interview with The Times today that it's his father, not his mother, that taught him to cook. He said about Victoria something like, not so much, Victoria, in the kitchen.
I'm not surprised, she's busy.
She is busy. And there's Brooklyn sharing some of his recipes on his Instagram feed. He's a fast whisker, isn't he? This is his big passion now, isn't it? He's tried different things. I think, didn't he do a little bit of football originally?
Yeah, then photography.
Then a bit of photography and a bit of fashion, like his mum. But now he's focusing on a lot of his cooking, but he said it's his dad, his influence.
Yeah, which is crazy, because when his dad was a footballer and I was a reporter and interviewing him, and I'd say, you're going home to your new flat, are you going to cook some food? He went, yeah, I'm going to do my super noodles. Hot water.
Cuisine.
Yeah.
Haute cuisine.
So he's obviously evolved, but I think, he's really good friends, isn't he, with Gordon Ramsay and his wife, and the families are friends, so... He's probably had a few lessons from Gordon Ramsay, don't you think?
That's quite a good person to get lessons from, isn't it?
Yeah.
As long as he doesn't shout at you.
That's about as far as it gets with me and my 3-year-old at the moment.
Oh, no, but that's perfect. That ticks all the boxes.
She doesn't. She never wants it to go in the oven, though. She gets really annoyed. She's like, no, don't cook it. I just want to eat it now.
Impatient. I love that. That makes sense. And have you got some sport coming up for us in a moment?
I have. And, Luke Littler, what an amazing superstar. And who'd have thought, in the space of, a couple of months, he's gone from schoolboy that no one knew to 1.1 million followers on Instagram, influencer. He's got a PR company behind him now. I mean, it's just incredible, and you just think the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
Phil the Power Taylor was this sort of previous, superstar of darts, and you just think Luke's
got years ahead of him.
He's got years ahead. It really has. He has become the youngest player to throw a perfect 9-dart leg on television. But could he also win his first professional title? And after 259 days, Brentford prepared to welcome their talisman, Ivan Toney, back to the Premier League. And Glasgow tried to book their spot in the Champions Cup knockout stages. We will have all the action for you.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Coming up, we're going to be talking about penguins.
I love penguins.
I love penguins.
Everyone loves penguins.
Everyone loves penguins. You can't fail to. And it's actually Penguin Awareness Day.
Oh,
I thought I'd make you aware of that.
I'm aware
We're going to be
now.
talking to an aquarist from the Sea Life London Aquarium about that in just a moment. First, though, let's video in on our top stories here this morning. And police are warning of an unprecedented rise in the threat from terrorism. According to the UK's most senior counter-terrorism officer, Israel's war in Gaza has radicalised Islamist extremists. An upgraded amber wind warning has been issued for large parts of the UK this weekend. The Met Office has issued a danger to life warning as Storm Isha is forecast to arrive, bringing winds of up to 80 miles an hour and heavy rain. The American actor Alec Baldwin faces new charges of involuntary manslaughter. Helena Hutchins was killed in 2021 when a prop gun Baldwin was holding went off. And over three-quarters of people have noticed shrinkflation on supermarket shelves, according to the consumer organisation Which. The watchdog has found that shoppers are now paying 21% more for 17% less. So, Jackie, another busy weekend of sport, and particularly a focus on one player returning to his team after a time away.
I know, it's fascinating, actually. Brentford have so missed Ivan Toney. He has so missed football that he spent the whole of the 8 months of his ban for breaking gambling rules getting his whole back tattooed. One of his tattoos is a kitten and a tiger. And the thing that he wants to get across is, when you look in the mirror, that's what you should see.
You should see the tiger, not the kitten.
You should see the tiger, not the kitten.
Got to find it inside us all.
Philosophical. I'm not sure how I feel about that, all of the tattoos. But anyway, he filled the time and he trained and he's ready to go. Let's talk about that. I am joined now by the football editor at the Daily Mail, Ian Ladyman. Thanks for joining us, Ian. Morning to you.
Morning.
So Ivan Toney back today, 8 months out on a ban. It's been at Brentford's expense. He's been paid. They've missed him. Does he owe them?
Yeah, I think he probably does owe them, and I think he probably knows that. He's spoken at length to Oliver Holt, our chief sports writer, in the page of the Daily Mail today, and he makes the point in that piece that he's back to score goals and to try and keep Brentford in the Premier League, because they have been on a pretty dismal run over the last 10 games. I think they've won 1 in the last 10 games, so they need him, and I would suspect that he probably still needs a little bit of love from them as well.
Yeah, and he's definitely going to get that love when he comes out of that tunnel as the captain today, isn't he? Somebody who also you feel needs love is Jordan Henderson. He didn't really last long in Saudi, leaving Al Ettifaq after less than 6 months. Do you think this could be a trend of, the big players going there, seeing the pound signs, not thinking through the football, or is this just Jordan?
No, I absolutely do think that there could well be a trend. There's a lot of dissatisfaction amongst some of the players who've gone to Saudi. Like you rightly say, they've essentially gone for the money. And when they've got there, they've found a pretty substandard league that's not particularly well watched over there. Difficult living conditions, difficult for families to settle. And I think some of them, if not all of them, have realised now that maybe the money, and there is a lot of it, but the money is maybe not quite the compensation for that they thought it was going to be. I think there'll be a few more following Jordan, heading back home with the tails between their legs before long, I think.
Because they always say that, don't they, footballers? Oh, I want to win trophies and I want to play at the highest level. And then they just make a mockery of that by, going out to somewhere like Saudi when the football's just not at the same level, really.
Well, some of them do, not all of them. I mean, I have a great understanding of some of the players who've gone there towards the end of their career. Because why would you not go somewhere that was going to give you a final payday before you hang up your football boots? I do have sympathy with them, and I understand that. I have less sympathy with people who've gone in the middle of their career when they could still be playing in England or in another major league somewhere else in the world, and they go there and they pretend they're going there for reasons that really they're not. And I think that's the problem that Jordan Henderson has now, is that he suggested he was going there to grow the game. And has come home after 3 or 4 months and is now going to play his football in Holland. So I think we can make of that what we will, really.
Yeah. We're hopping around subjects here, but while I've got you, I feel like I need to pick your brain. Financial fair play rules. Everton, mid-season, docked 10 points. Forest, been charged this week with breaking FFP as well. Are we going to see any more clubs docked points or charged? Any big ones, do you think?
Well, obviously we've still got Manchester City in the offing, the biggest one of all. But I think the case with Everton, in particular, the 10-point penalty, which I think a lot of us do think was slightly harsh. I think if that was designed to send a message out to other Premier League clubs, then it has certainly done that. Because if 10 points, as we know, can change your season. It can change the trajectory of a club. It can change the standing of a club, and ultimately it can change which division the club is playing in. So I think a message has gone out. Forest were already too far down the road to sort their books out. They're over the line. There is sympathy amongst some people in my profession for the clubs who've transgressed. I can see that argument, but equally, I can't get away from the fact that those rules are there. And there are upwardly mobile clubs, we've mentioned one of them already on this programme, like Brentford and Brighton, smaller, more modest Premier League clubs who are managing to move forward whilst playing within the rules. And I do keep coming back to this question of if they can do it, why can't Everton do it? Why haven't Nottingham and Forest been able to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, at this point in proceedings, because I think he was an Everton fan, wasn't he? Mike Dixon, your tennis correspondent who sadly died this week while covering the Australian Open. And Cam Norrie has won his match this morning, and he would have loved to have been doing that report with Norrie getting into the last 16. But shocking news out of Australia. And I just wanted to ask you, we all know he was a great writer because you could see all his reports, absolutely brilliant on the back of the Mail. What was he like as a bloke? Because I've met him lots of times, and initially I found him quite grumpy, but we totally warmed to each other in the end. But it was a slow burn.
Dicko wasn't grumpy. Dicko was the loveliest of men. I'd known him for the best part of 25 years. He was absolutely lovely to me when I first arrived in London to work for the Daily Mail 25 years ago. He was a giant of our industry, well loved by everybody in tennis, everybody in cricket. He could write about golf. He loved football. He loved Everton. He loved Tranmere Rovers. He's written across Olympic sports. You could give Mike Dixon anything. You could give Mike Dixon anything to do in our industry, and he'd have done it brilliantly, and he would have done it with grace, and he would have done it with a smile on his face. We're absolutely devastated by this loss, and absolutely our hearts are broken when we think of what this must be doing to Mike's family and what his wife and children will be going through right now.
And you're devastated. You're all devastated on the Mail, but the tennis writers are a really small group, really, aren't they? Of the men who travel with the tour day in, day out. It's a really close-knit group of guys. It must be absolutely devastating for them to try and continue to do their job, knowing what's happened to Dicko.
You know what? Every time I open the newspapers and see bylines from people like Stuart Fraser and Neil McLennan, who I know were with Dicko socially, I think the night before Dicko passed away, I can't even begin to think about how they're out there still doing their job, still producing the high quality work that they are. And I think that just speaks to their professionalism. One thing I would also like to say is that you only have to look at the number of people in the tennis community. I mean, the current tennis community, current players, past players who've taken time to pay tribute to Dicko. I think that just says everything about the love that everybody had for Dicko, the respect they had for Dicko. It's hard sometimes doing a sports writing job because you inevitably upset people, because not everybody plays well all the time, not everybody behaves well all the time. However many nice things you write or say about somebody in this job, you're always going to spend an awful lot of time talking about the negatives, talking about disappointments, talking about failures. Dicko did all that. He did all that without fear, without pause, and everybody he wrote about knew that it was coming from the right place, and that is why those people have been so quick this week to tell everybody how much they loved and respected him.
Oh, Ian Ladrin, those are brilliant words there, and you're right. Everybody came out and had something really lovely to say about Dicko, all the British players, Rafa Nadal, Federer, everybody. Very, very difficult for his family. And we wish them all the best, lots of love, and, you know, so difficult to deal with that. And for you too, Ian Laterman from the Mail, thanks very much indeed this morning.
Thank you.
So, staying with tennis, it's been a bit of a good day for the Brits. Well, I say Brits, one Brit.
Goal! I've spotted an opportunity, found the space and slotted it home. It's what I do. This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
So Britain's Cameron Norrie is into the fourth round of the Australian Open for the first time in his career. He was in brilliant form to beat the 11th seed Casper Ruud in 4 sets, a man he had never beaten before. Norrie is the last Brit standing in the singles, and he plays the winner of Alexander Zverev against Alex Michelin next. Men's second seed Carlos Alcaraz also through. He beat China's Zhongcheng Shang. Alcaraz was 2 sets up when Shang retires. The women's top seed Iga Swiatek is on court right now against Linda Noskova. The world number 1 took the first set. It is on serve in the second 3-all. Teenage darts prodigy Luke Littler has won his first senior title and become the youngest player to hit a 9-dart finish on television. Well, Littler, who turns 17 tomorrow, beat the 3-time world champion Michael van Gerwen in the Bahrain Masters final. Earlier here in the quarterfinals, he hit a 9-darter against Nathan Aspinall, only the second 9-darter to ever be thrown in the World Series, with the first coming from 16-time world champion Phil Taylor. Littler won the final 8-5, and next up for him is the Premier League darts, starting on the 1st of February. After 259 days, Brentford's talisman, Ivan Toney, will play tonight on his return from an 8-month ban for breaking the FA's betting rules. Toney will captain Brentford against Nottingham Forest live on Sky Sports Premier League from 5 o'clock this evening. Brentford will need his goals. They've only won once in 10 games, and he is desperate to score them.
I'm looking into the eyes of a player that are very committed, very excited, and can't wait. And he will also lead the team out of the tunnel. He will be the captain. As I said earlier in these press conferences, that is 99 point something that he will stay here.
And more on that big injury concern for Liverpool and one of the AFCON favourites, Egypt. Mo Salah will miss at least 2 games for Egypt with a leg injury. Salah went off injured in Egypt's 2-2 draw with Ghana on Thursday. He might be fit to play in a quarter-final should Egypt qualify without him, which I guess is good news for them. Could have been worse, couldn't it? Sadio Mane scored in a 3-1 win for defending champion Senegal over Cameroon. Senegal moved to the top of Group C and reached the last 16 with a match to spare. Wins also for Guinea and Cape Verde. In the WSL last night, England's Rachel Daly got the only goal as Aston Villa won 1-0 at Leicester. In the Championship, Liverpool loanee Fabio Carvalho scored the winner as Hull won 1-0 at Sunderland, and that win takes them back into the playoff places. Jordan Henderson says financial considerations were nothing to do with his decision to join Ajax instead of returning to the Premier League. Henderson finalised his switch to the Dutch side when Saudi Arabian club Al Ettifaq agreed to end his 3-year contract after just 6 months.
It had nothing to do with anything else other than a football decision. I felt it was a perfect opportunity for me to come to such a huge club and showcase again what I've tried to do my whole life, and that's dedicate my life to football and try to be as successful as possible.
Glasgow have qualified for the last 16 of rugby's European Champions Cup with an impressive win over Toulon last night. Glasgow won 29-5 at Scotstoun. They had to win to guarantee that they would reach the next stage, and they did, scoring 5 tries, 2 of them from Hugh Jones. Bristol's Champions Cup dream is over. They were beaten by Connaught in Ireland. Connaught got their first points of the tournament in a 27-10 win. In the second-tier European Challenge Cup, Gloucester secured a home tie in the last 16 with victory over Castres at Kingsholm. 4 tries saw Gloucester win 35-5 to top Pool 3. Edinburgh reached the knockout stages by winning 31-19 at Scarlets. Edinburgh ran in 5 tries in Llanelli, but finished the match with 13 players. Scarlets are the first Welsh region not to get a single point in the pool stages. Britain's Natasha Jonas and her American opponent, Michaela Meyer, both made the weight for tonight's world title fight. Jonas is headlining an arena fight in her home city of Liverpool for the very first time. It is live on Sky Sports Arena, rather aptly, from 7 o'clock. So build up to the Premier League lunchtime kickoff. That's Arsenal against Crystal Palace over on Sky Sports News right now, and we'll see you a bit later on.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. Anyone got gloves in my size? I need 4.
Don't go away, we've got lots to come. We've got lots of penguins to come on The Breakfast Show because it is Penguin Awareness Day.
Who knew?
I know, well, I didn't, but now I'm aware.
No, you didn't.
We're going to be speaking to a senior aquarist at Sea Life London Aquarium about why today matters.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone. I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News at the Old Bailey.
So it's Penguin Awareness Day. Each year on January the 20th, we get the opportunity to celebrate our black and white feathered friends, but also take a look at what's putting these creatures at risk. So joining me now is senior aquarist at Sea Life London Aquarium, Joe Feasey-Kemp. Bathed in blue, Joe, good to see you. You're actually at the aquarium now, aren't you? Close to where the penguins hang out. So talk us through just what you can see behind you, first of all.
Yes, hi. I'm at Sea Life London Aquarium, and indeed, right behind me, I think you just see one lurking over here somewhere. are Gen 2 penguins. So we've got a colony of 16 Gen 2 penguins here at Sea Life London, and this morning it's cleaning and swim time for them. They get up with the daylight, which comes on at about 9 o'clock at the moment. First thing they do, go for a nice little swim, a little bit of a wash, and then stand around waiting for the keepers to come along. So that's what's going
bringing
on
food,
right
no
now.
doubt.
Oh yeah. Main reason they like us, yeah.
So I want to hear a bit more about the Gen 2s in a minute. But first of all, tell us about Penguin Awareness Day and why you think it's important. Why should we be aware of penguins?
So I think most people are aware of penguins, but the main point of Penguin Awareness Day is to raise awareness for the things they are facing in the wild, which are reducing some species numbers. Like African penguins, for example, they are the most endangered penguin. They face a lot of habitat threats, overfishing, climate change. All those factors combined are having an effect on some penguins in the wild, which is a shame. So as fun as they are to watch and just see them do all their weird things, building nests out of rocks, it's important to be mindful that these guys are facing some challenges in the wild.
Yeah, and so that's what today is all about. But tell us a little bit about the Gen 2s then, because they sound great. I mean, they're brilliant divers, aren't they? Tell us a little bit about some of their characteristics.
So yeah, Gen 2s as a whole, they are some of the nicest penguins. They've all stopped. They're very curious. I'll just turn it this way. You can see they're all watching me.
Oh, yes.
There we go. But yeah, well, I don't want to be on camera. I watch from the side. So yeah, they're very curious animals. Really nice to sort of see. But also, yeah, they are incredible divers. They are the fastest swimming species of penguins. They can swim at about 22 miles per hour, which is pretty speedy. I can't get anywhere near that when I'm in the swimming pool. And otherwise, they're quite a small species of penguins. So because of that, they're a little bit more cautious and curious, just because there's a couple of predators in the wild. So they're really great to watch. But otherwise, in the wild, you'll find these guys around the Falkland Isles. So they don't usually live on the ice like you imagine most penguins. They're usually on a bit of dirt or a bit of grass, and they dig a little, don't dig a little hole, but they'll find somewhere like that. So penguins do nest and live in a variety of places, not just in Antarctica.
Amazing. Well, Joe Fusey-Kemp, really lovely to talk to you this morning. I think the penguins are looking at you going, is he going to feed me or is he just going to keep talking? So maybe we'll let you get on with that. And thanks so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And I was, thank you. I was just reading that their latest edition is called Daly, after Tom Daly, because of his diving
good at
abilities.
diving. Brilliant.
Yeah, very good.
And they can dance really well.
Can they?
Well, I've just seen Happy Feet.
Oh, OK.
I think I've been to that penguin enclosure. You can kind of stick your head up in this dome and they all come walking next to you. Yeah.
Because they're so curious.
So I go when I tell the boss that I'm going for lunch with an MP. I'm just across the river
You're
at the Sea Life Centre hanging out with the penguins instead.
So many secrets have come out today. I've learned
Tricks of the trade.
your love of crisps,
scarecrows,
broad beans, your allotment,
and
penguins. Scarecrows. It's very revelatory, this new set. It's bringing out all new truths, isn't it? Yes, so be aware of penguins. That's the message from today. Gen 2s use pebbles during mating season as well. I don't know how, but anyway, that's another fact that I just had to share. Anyway, cliffhanger. Yeah. Tune in for more, or possibly not. Let's find out what the weather's doing now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Apparently they present the pebbles to their partners. There you go. Little fact for you. Weather-wise, all change this weekend as snow and ice are replaced by wind and rain with the arrival of Storm Isha on Sunday. Strong winds will affect all areas with an amber warning for parts of the north, west and later the southeast. Southwesterly winds will reach 50 to 60 miles per hour gusts widely and perhaps in excess of 80 miles an hour locally. And there'll be significant rainfall as well, amounting to 2 inches in some parts and 4 inches over the higher ground in the west.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
That's it from us, but coming up here on Sky News, Sam Washington will have all the latest on the unprecedented rise in the terror threat in the UK. More on that from her in a moment.